A man with white hair stops and looks ahead, where someone is lifting up a crown. Kneeling before him is the arrogant king of humans, begging for forgiveness for all the wrong he's done, surrendering his throne in exchange for his life. The pointy-eared figure just keeps staring, and as everyone expected, the war ended with the vampire's victory. He reaches out his hand, but in a flash, one strike, the king's head falls to the ground. From now on, humans will live like cattle under vampire rule. Everyone around starts screaming in despair, but he simply gives the order to kill everyone there. All of it, just to make sure the glory of the vampire era lasts forever. On the battlefield, absolutely everyone is dead. Two men walk up to a small group near the cliff's edge, asking if they're the last ones left. But one on the left mutters that everything ends too quickly when there are so few humans left. The one on the right tells them not to fear death, pain is only temporary. But a mother clutching her children in the back speaks up, saying the days of vampire oppression are numbered. In her dreams, God had revealed to her that a human was being sent to save humanity. The men glance at each other, confused, wondering what this strange woman is talking about. One of them tells her not to worry because she won't live to see tomorrow anyway. At that moment, she moves forward toward the first man, and the blonde one warns that they're coming. The knight faces the vampire head-on and lands a vertical slash clean through him. Yet the vampire disintegrates and reappears behind him. Where the knight turns, the vampire already has a crimson slash across him. The blonde rushes in to help, but he's torn in half as well. The last survivor there is trembling, crying, and tries to strike, but his sword is driven straight into his chest. The vampire steps in from behind, effortlessly catching the blade with one hand, snapping it, and ripping him apart too. Another body drops to the ground. The vampire advances toward the mother and her children, saying death will be swift. He raises his arm, ready to strike, but just as he's about to deliver the blow, someone calls out his name, Yuko. It's a friend, urging him to look to the side. Out of the smoke, a strange knight steps forward. The men ask who he is and if he belongs to that army, but Yuko says he doesn't have the scent of a living human. He smells like a corpse. The stranger shifts his foot forward and leaps straight at him. The vampires laugh at his audacity for attacking, but in the very next second, his hand is already right in front of the first vampire's face. He grabs hold, slams him down, and explodes him against the ground. The vampire disintegrates almost completely, stunned and confused at what this bastard really is. The man had just cleared nearly 300 meters in a single leap, and there his friend is crumbling away into dust on the ground. Yuko braces himself, lunges forward, aiming a slash at his opponent's leg. Seeing the perfect opening, he drives his sword straight into the center of the knight's chest. The blade sticks there, and Yuko demands to know why he didn't dodge. He's sure the strike landed directly in the heart, convinced the man should be dead any second now. But the knight simply extends his arm, grabs Yuko by the head, and lifts him up. The vampire, panicked, demands to know how he's still moving with a sword stuck in his heart. Without answering, the knight drives his fist right into the vampire's chest, disintegrating him on the spot in front of everyone. The blonde woman nearby, overcome with emotion, calls out to the hero, but he notices only the children have survived. He tells her to just keep moving forward, that 3 miles away lies the sacred land where they will find protection. The girl, still overwhelmed, celebrates and declares he must be the hero sent by the gods. But the knight seems confused by this and begins removing his helmet. With nails in his chin and his entire head stitched together, he asks if she really thinks he looks anything like a hero. The children are frozen in silence. Then, as his nose slips off, he bends down to pick it up, and the kids scream even louder, calling him a monster before running off in terror. The so-called hero just laughs, saying that kind of reaction was to be expected. In this world, there's a rumor that circulates. The rumor of a knight, half vampire and half human, who cannot die. The scene shifts to some time earlier. A group of people dressed in plaid doctor robes find a man lying in the middle of an arena. One of them remarks how incredible it is he had died still standing in a fighting stance. Another asks if this is the one called Gunther, and the reply comes with certainty, yes. 228 battles in the arena, 228 victories, and not a single defeat. They knew he was the greatest gladiator of that age, but even the strongest human could never defeat the vampires. The bulky plaid doctor questions whether it's wise to entrust their future to a stranger like him. The man known as Aryan replies that he'll take the risk and believe in this fighter. He asks about the state of the corpse, and the response is that decomposition has already begun, but it can still be used. And then, wait, what's this? The female plague doctor, fierce and sharp, steps forward. She approaches the body, saying the times demand a hero, and that is why he will become immortal. The scene shifts again, to the boy standing atop a mountain of countless corpses. Someone praises his work, saying once again he has survived. Suddenly, he opens his eyes and sees all the plague doctors cheering in front of him, shouting that his eyes are open and asking if he can understand their words. Confused, he demands to know what happened. He is certain he was dead. Aryan explains that he has been reborn to save humanity. Of course, he has no idea what they mean, and the bald doctor orders a mirror to be brought. As it is held up, Gunther looks and curses. What kind of nightmare is this? The boy has no arms, no legs, nothing. Horrified, he asks what kind of monster he has become. But Aryan calmly tells him he is not the monster. He's the last hope of humanity. The bald man then explains that his brain now holds a life support device, something they only managed to create once. As long as that mechanism keeps functioning, he cannot die, even if his entire body is destroyed. Arian tells him not to worry, the arms and legs are right there, made with special muscular engineering. The arms are already like those of a bodybuilder. And even then, the fibers produce dozens of times more strength than normal. Being humanity's greatest gladiator and now equipped with those enhanced muscles, they believe he can fight a vampire head-on. Gunther, however, isn't exactly shaken anymore and asks if he was really brought back just to fight vampires. Arian tells him to understand that he's the perfect candidate, and she knows he was also killed by vampires. So for the sake of humanity, he should fight for everyone. Gunther replies that this whole save humanity thing sure sounds nice and all, but no. Still, he has one condition, so he tells her to get closer and listen. The bald one steps in, all excited, saying that whatever Gunther asks for, they'll consider. But Gunther traps the man with his stumps against his thigh, demanding they free him from this curse immediately. Arian calls for Reiner, but Gunther warns them. He became the strongest gladiator because he learned to kill without hesitation. To him, both humans and vampires were selfish, small-minded people, and being resurrected just to fight again in this state only proves how foolish they are. The one thing he values above all else isn't other people, it's his own life. That's why, if they don't want to see this man's head blown off right now, they better give him arms and legs and release him. Arian, a bit shocked, glances at the clock. Gunther asks what she's waiting for. Does she want the man's head to explode? She replies that he doesn't have much time left. Gunther, confused, presses her, and she explains he has about 4 seconds. When he asks what she means, something flickers in his brain, and apparently, he dies. The bald man is freed, and someone comments that, as expected, Gunther is out of control. Gunther opens his eyes again and finds himself face to face with the bald man once more, who asks why he did such a cruel thing, his jaw still aching. Gunther demands to know what happened, and the bald one explains that just like any animal or machine, you need power to move. The source of power for his body is the life essence of a human, and it seems to be coming from Reiner, standing nearby. Oh no, maybe Reiner is a man. Hopefully not just a flat-chested woman. Gunther asks what they're talking about, and Reiner, who I'll keep calling a woman until proven otherwise, says it's exactly what he thinks. For him to stay alive, he must remain connected through that device and draw her life essence. Once the connection is cut, he can only move for about 2 hours at most. Gunther, desperate, demands to know what kind of nightmare this is, but the bald one calmly says his reaction is expected. He insists Gunther must believe because the entire lives of everyone, along with humanity's survival, rest on this research. They call people to receive these devices human batteries. Out of the hundreds who volunteered, only Arian survived. It's something extremely difficult to create, so Arian might remain the only human battery forever. Gunther orders him to explain further, and he says it's exactly that. Gunther can't fight just for his own life, he has to protect hers too. Otherwise, he'll only last a couple of hours before ending up as nothing but a decoration on the wall. The other option, obviously, is for him to accept humanity's support and fight against the vampires. In the end, though, it's his choice to make. Gunther is there, trying to process everything he just heard, when suddenly someone calls out for Reiner. Another plague doctor rushes in, saying they have an urgent problem. The bald man starts to reply that they're in the middle of something important when the newcomer blurts out about vampires, right before his sword pierces through his back. His body falls to the floor, and then a strange, rat-like vampire steps in, saying Lord Benzel ordered him to bring all the humans and the beautiful women. The other stranger on the right agrees, saying that's exactly it, while everyone else is stunned, wondering how the vampires even got into the base. One of the doctors asks Reiner what they're going to do. Meanwhile, Gunther is already shouting, telling them to attach his arms and legs if they have any love for their own lives. The bald one hesitates at the command, and everyone else is reluctant, saying they'll die if they get too close to him. Gunther snaps back that if they don't, they'll lose their general once he's dead. The men argue that there are only 4 people. They don't need a general. At that, Arian steps up, saying she'll buy them time, and orders the rest of the organs to be connected. The bald man tries to stop her, telling her not to do it, and even Gunther yells at her to stay put. But she's already face to face with the vampires, who demand to know what kind of courage she thinks she has to face them alone. She should know they're superior in every way. But before they can finish their arrogance, the first arrow flies straight at one's face, caught in midair by the vampire. She sneers that they talk too much. He crushes the arrow with his hand and moves like a blur to the side. She fires another shot, nearly perfect, but he dodges again. She crouches, looses another, he dodges once more, then closes the distance and drives a brutal kick straight into her stomach, slamming her into the wall and grabbing her by the throat. The creepy one stares at her and remarks on how beautiful her face is. I agree. He says Lord Benzel will like her a lot. Another freak steps in, insisting he wants a share too, since the other one got the last 2. While they're bickering, someone mutters that they're just playing around, and bam, before the vampire can even turn, a devastating kick smashes his head against the wall. Now that I notice, he looks a bit like Cyborg from Teen Titans. Arian cheers, but she's instantly grabbed by the head, about to pop like a balloon. Gunther warns her to be careful. His life depends on her now. Broken and battered, she insists someone had to act. He stares at her for a moment and says fine. But then the vampires rise again, their bodies piecing themselves back together. Gunther is stunned that the creature didn't vanish even after its head was blown apart. Arian explains that to kill a vampire, you must destroy its heart. There's no other way. Another one charges straight at them. Gunther shoves her aside as the vampire lunges, aiming a punch at his chest. Gunther just stands still, smirking, staring him down. The vampire doesn't get it, and his head explodes again. While that one falls, another rushes past, heading straight for Arian. But Gunther rockets forward like a torpedo and headbutts him, blasting him into the wall as well. Reiner can hardly believe it. This is the first time the boy is using that body, that he's moving so naturally. It doesn't just look like he's fighting well, it looks like he was born with these modifications. And he already realizes that while his strength is insane, his speed isn't abnormal. The only way to move fast is by using the leg muscles to launch himself, to hurl his body forward, since his limbs themselves don't move that quickly. Strangely enough, in just a second, he's already adapted. Arian notices right away that he's actually enjoying the fight. Gunther seizes the vampire's head and says he's practiced enough with this body. The vampire, though, demands to know what he is. Do humans create some kind of monster? Gunther chuckles, saying those words are a little harsh. He was just born. He reaches out his hand to finish him off, but the vampire begs him to wait, offering a peace treaty, claiming he has something valuable. Gunther tells him to speak, and the vampire reveals that Lord Benzel is nearby. They are his creations, and as soon as they die, Benzel will sense their disappearance and appear right there. Even, he would have a hard time fighting that guy. Gunther asks why this so-called Benzel would bother avenging trash like him. The desperate vampire screams that it's because Benzel loves them. He's the only one in the whole world who loves them all. And besides, if Gunther just hands over that girl, Benzel will let everyone else go free. Gunther glances over and says he can let him take the bald one, but the girl is off limits. The vampire refuses, insisting he can't give up the bald man. Gunther replies that, unfortunately, negotiations have ended, and drives his ham straight through the vampire's chest. Offer rejected. The same happens to the other one, who vanishes while calling for Benzel. The protagonist wants to know who this Benzel is and why everyone worships him so much. Arian explains that he's a high-rank vampire. In the vampire world, they're ranked by the purity of their blood. High-rank vampires are the pure ones or naturally. Low-rank vampires are the offspring of variants and mixed bloodlines. Looking at the illustrations, Gunther points out that the black-haired vampires all seem to be low rank. She confirms it, saying the high-rank ones have white hair and are weak to sunlight. The problem is they can use their own blood to forge countless weapons in battle, making them extremely powerful. While the two were talking, Reinert steps in, asking if they didn't hear what the vampire just said. Benzel will be there in at most an hour. Gunther asks if the bald man really believes that. He answers that it doesn't matter. They should at least be prepared. 1 hour isn't enough for them to get ready to fight. Arian cuts in, saying that before anything else, they need a clear answer. Is he going to fight for humanity or not? Gunther pauses to think and then says that just like he mentioned earlier, the most important thing is his own life. And apparently the only way he'll survive right now is by cooperating. Arian thanks him, calling it a noble decision, while he already demands to be connected before it's too late. She agrees but says she has a little gift for him first. That's when he receives the armor. His head looks tiny compared to it, like some bodybuilder with an oversized frame. Strangely, the bald one says it looks wonderful and fantastic, asking what Gunther thinks. Every piece was chosen after countless tests to ensure he had the perfect heroic knight appearance, like someone who's returned from the dead. Gunther, however, says the whole thing feels outdated, like something from the old days. Arian explains that the armor is refined with mithril. On top of that, each part was individually fitted to his body so his limbs can be swapped easily even while wearing it. This design was necessary because, against vampires who move with extreme speed, he'll take many hits, and they need to minimize the damage he suffers. She points out the gauge on his wrist. That's literally his battery meter, like on a Samsung phone. It shows how long he can keep moving. Since he's already hooked up through his head, the timer is set to 2 hours. Just then, the ceiling starts to rumble violently. Everyone feels the impacts from above, one after another, and Gunther realizes something massive is approaching. He warns them, saying it's something gigantic. But the bald one argues that those vampires died barely 40 minutes ago. Gunther just orders them to cut the connection and asks what the escape plan is. Arian explains they're in catacombs beneath his hometown, the place specifically chosen to create him. And that front door is the only entrance and the only exit. Gunther snaps that she should have mentioned that earlier. With no other option to deal with the crashing above, he puts on his helmet and warns her not to show herself no matter what happens. Now hidden behind the helm, his expression hardens as he glares at the entrance. From the doorway, out of the darkness, 3 bald figures appear, strange boys greeting them with a casual hey. Everyone is confused seeing those 3 approaching, but clearly this is far more terrifying than any normal person. Now that I notice, our protagonist really does have a bit of a guts vibe this time. The strange vampires stand there smiling, saying he's the one who killed their family. Gunther wants to know if those were those ugly low-rank vampires, if it was him who killed them all, and if he really finished them that quickly. The one in the middle laughs, saying it's impressive for a human. Those others, however, were souls abandoned by their parents, which is why they had such hideous appearances. And he thinks it's very sad that the boy felt no pity for the miserable way they died. Gunther, meanwhile, asks the bald man if this Benzel character is out of his mind. At that moment, the bald one asks if this is Benzel, the face collector. The peculiar little heads confirm it, and the bald man says they're even, since both sides have killed many comrades. So if he proposes, a fair offer would be for each side to simply go their own way. The heads seem oddly calm, admitting it's not such a bad idea, especially with sunrise approaching. Too bad they've sworn loyalty to Lord Julius, a vow that declares every human in this world must be killed. Sorry, Bald One. Negotiations are impossible. Gunther then asks what Benzel plans to do with that three-headed body. On his own, he won't last long. The heads start laughing, mocking him, calling him funny, and more begin to sprout. Their words shift from mouth to mouth as they explain that the very reason low-rank vampires exist is to protect the high-rank ones. If sunlight didn't exist, they would truly be immortal. And their Benzel is right in the middle of all those heads, using them as protection against the sun. Gunther asks if that thing really is a vampire. Arian immediately realizes the obvious. All the heads are connected through blood, and now the name Face Collector makes perfect sense. Still, she's sure there must be some core managing all those connections. But before she can finish her thought, the heads lunge forward to bite. The impact hits like a magical strike, smoke rising, and of course, Gunther saves her. Yahello's the only person keeping him alive. He orders her not to just stand there and to run to safety. She warns him to be careful. If he doesn't figure out where the core is, the fight will be meaningless. He simply tells her not to worry about him and to focus on staying alive herself. Benzel moves toward another fallen body, ready to bite down with his heads. But Gunther steps in, slamming him with a brutal punch that leaves him dazed. Before he can even process what happened, Gunther follows up with another blow, hurling him into the air. He warns that if the core can't be found, he'll just smash everything until it shows itself. Reinhard is stunned. He's actually standing toe-to-toe with a high-rank vampire. As the severed heads crumble, Benzel marvels at his strength, saying it's incredible. He's never heard of such a powerful hero among humans. They question whether he really is human at all. Gunther replies that it doesn't matter, and drives another punch straight into the mass of heads. But suddenly, one of the heads bites into his armor from within, declaring that in the end he's been caught. The bite force of those jaws matches his own fists, meaning, once they begin to bite down, there's no escape. Gunther tries to swing his other arm for another punch, but it too is bitten and held in place. In seconds, both arms and his legs are pinned down. Benzel sneers, saying he has a little gift for Gunther. He's about to experience the true hell that exists inside. The next chapter opens with an abandoned dump where a child is crying. More than obvious, that child longs for their mother and is calling out for help. But days went by and no one heard that desperate crying. Eventually, the child's cries came to an end. From that moment on, the child gave up on finding the warmth of family or anyone who might come to save them, and instead focused only on finding a way to survive. The heads were biting into Gunther's arms and armor, and he admits the bite force is incredibly strong. 2 or 3 heads he could handle, but there were hundreds, all latched onto his body. With his limbs immobilized, he has no idea how to break free. He imagines there must be something deeper down, but he can't even guess how many layers of heads are stacked below him. And if he fails, at the very least, he needs a backup plan. Then from the depths, someone declares that these filthy vampires will not pass. A voice shouts that he will defeat them all. Gunther is confused, but the massive heads, once human, cry out that they haven't been defeated and will never give up. At that moment, a hand appears over him and a strange, shadowy demon emerges, declaring that this man was once a great hero, Albert Lauren, who saved hundreds of people. But now he too is part of the collection. Gunther points out that these heads are sitting on a pillar of hair, meaning they must be quite valuable. Benzel confirms it, saying these are the heads of heroes who sacrifice themselves trying to save others. He chose the most beautiful ones to display. Their noble spirit of sacrifice will continue to exist until the day humanity perishes. Then he asks if Gunther doesn't find the hell he created to be wonderful. Gunther replies that it's an impressive place, but fitting Benzel's head in there will be a problem. Benzel reassures him not to worry, praising the strength and determination he's shown as greater than any hero he's ever seen. But Gunther cuts him off, saying he doesn't get it. He's just really ugly, and his head would look awful in that collection. Benzel, thrown off, asks if he's truly that ugly. Gunther tells him to take a look. When his helmet comes off, Benzel starts sweating, bewildered, unable to comprehend what he's seeing. He admits this is the ugliest human face he's ever laid eyes on, uglier even than the most grotesque vampires. Gunther looks downhearted, saying he never imagined he'd live long enough to be called a monster by a monster. Well, now that Benzel has seen his face, maybe he can let him go. Benzel, still confused, asks if Gunther really thinks he'll walk out alive. Gunther answers that he thought so. It should have been impossible. But now that he's seen a glimmer of hope, he has to fight. And with that, he sinks his teeth into the first head, ripping off his arm. Benzel stares, then bursts into laughter, asking if Gunther really thinks he can chew his way out. He has to understand, this is nowhere near enough. No one has ever escaped this place. But Gunther keeps biting, declaring that he's not just anyone, he's Gunther, and then slams another head with a brutal headbutt. No matter what happens here, he swears he'll survive. He bites down on another, tearing it apart. The demon keeps watching as more and more heads close in. From the outside, it looks like a massive hornet's nest. The plague doctors assume he's already been killed or devoured, wondering what they should do next. The bald one insists he warned them. Choosing Gunther was a mistake. He tells Arian this was the worst possible outcome, sending a corpse knight into a place like this. They never should have placed humanity's hopes on such an idiot. But Arian points, telling them to look, multiple heads are falling. And in the middle of it all, suddenly Gunther bursts out with a devastating punch. Right then, the bald one shouts that he always trusted Gunther, the hero. The protagonist slams into the ground, instantly dodging to the side as yet another pillar of heads comes crashing down. But then the bald one asks, where are the boy's legs? I just saw him moving only with his hands. Aaron steps in and says the plan has changed. There's no way they can win this fight in hand-to-hand combat. That's why they'll handle it differently, with Arian carried on his back. The plan is to run until sunrise, but just as a head lunges to bite, he leaps while more like drags himself with his arms, trying to escape with her on his back. Arian reveals she actually brought extra parts of his body along. She hadn't mentioned it earlier because he never agreed to their proposal, but some of those parts have been modified to serve as weapons. Gunther, however, thinks there isn't enough time to equip anything. Doing that might only cost them everything. First, they need to create some distance. He propels himself forward again. Now I'm not sure if we should call it a jump, since he's using his hands. That's a paradox. Hold on, I'll check with ChatGPT. And well, ChatGPT says if you push off with your hands, that's technically a lift using the upper body muscles, not a jump. A jump only happens when you use your legs. Unfortunately, during one of those lifts, a demon catches sight of Arian's face and grins, saying she's far too beautiful. Immediately, he starts running toward her in desperation, shouting that she must be part of the collection. Gunther, hiding nearby, mutters that it looks like she's gained herself a fan. How long until sunrise, he asks. She replies, if it's the same as yesterday, maybe 5 minutes. The good news is the exit is clearly in sight. They just have to wait for the chance and make a dash for it. But as they're hiding, the bald one and the other plague doctors are trapped behind iron bars, begging for help. Gunther says it's sad to see human lives about to end, but the truth is he's going to use them as sacrifices so he can escape. He tells Arian this is the best choice for humanity's future, so she better not do anything foolish. But she stares at him, and he notices. She keeps staring, and he realizes she's about to do something reckless. Sure enough, she steps out from behind the pillar and calls out for Benzel, telling him she's been waiting for him. In an instant, the monster stops attacking the others and charges straight toward her. Gunther is forced to lunge with his arms, grabbing her and running, scolding her for doing something so stupid. Now that they're near the back of the chamber, there's no choice. They have to escape. He rushes toward the door, hurls himself forward, but snapping mouths rise up from below, nearly biting him. He slams into the staircase wall, then bolts upward as the swarm of heads chases after them, shrieking that they're thrilled by his courage. They say he absolutely must join the collection. Gunther keeps climbing, and Arian warns they're almost reaching the sunlight. But then the heads grab hold of one of his arms again, telling him to become part of the collection once more. He snarls at them to let go, then smashes his own arm, using the recoil to fling himself upward. At last, he breaks free of the underground and faces the rising sun. But the moment he relaxes, Arian calls out she's being pulled back. One of the heads sneers that, in the end, they still managed to take one with them. And it seems that's true. Arian is gone, while Gunther screams in despair. But one of the heads that touched the sunlight is reduced to ash. Nearby, vampires call out for Lord Benzel, asking if he's all right. He answers sadly that he failed to avenge his family because of that monstrous night. The deformed creatures reassure him, saying it's fine. The important thing is that he's alive. Their family's spirit will live on, and everyone will remain proud. But Benzel warns them that this enemy is not someone they can handle. They can't afford to lose more family members. He'll have to deal with this problem himself. And with that, he says he needs a few more faces. At that moment, one of the vampires says it's all right and announces they've brought 34 faces that are perfect for him. Another says he brought 7, another adds he brought 2. Benzel celebrates, praising them all, saying everyone is wonderful and that it was incredible work. Still, he admits this is the one he likes most. He tells Arian to stay calm. Soon she'll be inside him. Together, they'll remain bound to each other until the very end of humanity. Meanwhile, Gunther is shouting, demanding that the bald one connect everything quickly. The bald man tells him to calm down. He never manages to do anything properly when rushed. Gunther snaps back, telling him to look at the gauge on his wrist. He's running out of time. Soon he'll freeze up, and that'll be the end of everything. So he asks, couldn't they just grab someone else, turn them into a human battery, and revive him again? The bald one asks if that means Gunther wouldn't save her. Gunther chuckles, who knows maybe he wouldn't. The bald one explains that, unfortunately, it's impossible to create another human battery. The device inside him doesn't regenerate a corpse. All it does is supply power to a dead body, stabilizing it temporarily. That's why completely dead bodies can't be brought back, and normally full decomposition begins after 3 days. Gunther realizes that if he dies now, after 3 days his body will be too decomposed to restore. By then everything will already be gone. The bald man explains they were late arriving at the arena because they only received news of his death at the Colosseum after it was too late. The plan was to reach him before decomposition started, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. On top of that, creating a new human capable of serving as a battery would take years. In other words, if he doesn't save Aryan, he's dead too. Gunther, still confused, demands an explanation of how this device works and where it came from. But the bald one says he can't reveal that yet. As trust builds between them, he'll learn little by little. The protagonist begins to stand, asking where his right arm is. The bald one answers that it's something special. Since close combat against Benzel is difficult, how about having something for long range? Gunther grins, saying that sounds interesting. Place your bets, folks. Cannon, machine gun, grenade launcher, or something else? Make your mental bets and let's see who wins. My guess, cannon. Back with Benzel, the vampire is in a frenzy, trembling and crying, spreading his arms wide, telling the victim not to fear. It won't hurt. Blood trickles from his hand, crawling over the person's face, consuming it completely. Benzel declares that his blood is both his instrument and his will. The body collapses, headless. Another face has been collected. Smiling through it, he says his blood is his will incarnate. The people in the back are frozen in terror, afraid they'll be next. Benzel fixes his eyes on Aryan and tells her she's next. Finally, they'll become one. She just stands there looking back at him. He comments on her determination. Eyes filled with honor and fortitude show no fear, even in the face of death. He's eager to witness the moment when those same eyes will be consumed by fear and regret. But Aryan replies that the only truth that frightens her is that no one has ever managed to save his heart. Benzel twitches his fingers and admits she really is impressive. He's eager to see that same face repeat those words once he's inside her. He prepares his blood to advance on her when suddenly someone calls his name. Out of nowhere, another man attacks, saying he waited for Benzel to drop his guard for the perfect strike. He lunges in with a blade, but of course he's instantly immobilized. And you can't help but ask, why on earth did he call out first? He should have just gone for a clean strike. Benzel's followers apologize, saying they never imagined a knight would be among the faces. The captured man screams that even if he dies, someday a hero will succeed in ending Benzel's miserable existence. Benzel steps closer, saying he loves encountering a hero full of courage like this. It's truly a pleasure. When he sees that disgusting faith humans carry, believing someone will save or avenge them, he can't help but laugh. He then holds out his deformed hand, telling the man to look closely. It became like this when he tried to save people from a fire. He remembers vividly, staggering out of those suffocating flames, the agony of his flesh burning. And what did he gain in return? Praise for being a hero? Respect from others? He received that for a short while, but soon admiration turned to disdain and he was treated like filth. The hero shouts for him to stop lying. That story can't be true. But Benzel insists he can prove it easily. He wipes the blood from his face, revealing a melted, corrupted visage. The hero recoils in shock, and Benzel says that exact reaction is what everyone who once called him a hero eventually had. In time, he was no longer welcome anywhere. Not because he had done wrong, but because in saving one person, he was left permanently disfigured. Everyone turned their backs on him. He hides his face again and declares that this sacrifice will be meaningless as well. In the end, people only end up hurt. The hero shouts that just because Benzel suffered in the past doesn't give him the right to massacre people now. Benzel coldly responds that this isn't a massacre. One day, humanity will finally understand what they were trying to achieve. He slashes his hand, letting blood cover his face when suddenly someone cuts him off, saying he talks too much. Benzel glances aside, and something slices through his deformed hand. Above, a gray pillar juts up, like some kind of twisted tree. Turns out, nobody could have guessed, he actually has a weapon that launches giant iron stakes. If you predicted that, you're a legend. Gunther, of course, complains, asking which terrible designer created a weapon that's practically impossible to aim. At that moment, Aryan calls to him. Gunther relieves she's alive, jokes that if she had died, he would have killed her himself. Benzel remarks that for Gunther to have walked all the way there alone, he must be eager to die. But Gunther just tells him to cut the small talk and come at him. He's running out of time. One of them is going to die within minutes. The weapon they gave him is called the Bone Launcher. The name was thought up without much care. It's one of the modified weapons the Bald One designed, an arm adapted to create firing force through muscle energy. Specialized fibers pull back, then release violently, launching projectiles like bullets that can pierce through 4 or 5 walls. The drawbacks are obvious. First, the muscles have to contract fully to fire. Second, it only has 6 shots. Gunther mutters that the thing is almost useless, but at least now he has a way to fight at long range. Meanwhile, the Bald One is panicking, insisting they must kill Benzel at any cost. There's no way to save Aryan without going through him, and even if they could rescue her and run, they'd never escape the lower-ranked demons who would eventually lead Benzel to them again. Considering Gunther's body urgently needs to recharge energy, this enemy has to die. Gunther steadies himself, tells them to relax, and then hurls himself forward, promising that everyone else can die as long as he survives. Back in the catacombs, Benzel mutters that tracking him here wasn't difficult. The problem is he only has 15 minutes, and in that time, he'll have to finish everything as fast as possible. He sneers that Gunther's weapon is disgusting. It didn't matter how powerful the shot was, Benzel boasted that with countless layers of protection, nothing would ever pierce through. But the moment he said that, Gunther fired, blasting a crater straight into the mass of faces. He admitted his aim was still bad, but soon enough he'd get the hang of it and strike the heart. Strangely, Benzel told his allies to protect the remaining faces. They protested, saying it made no sense. They should attack the boy and restrict his movements instead. Benzel agreed, but told them to be careful. Oddly enough, he really did seem to care about that, which was unsettling. The first two rushed in, vowing to destroy that strange weapon. Gunther warned them to stay away. He wasn't looking to fight them. Still, he smashed one with a punch, breaking him apart on the ground. But because the heart wasn't destroyed, the vampire reformed behind him, grabbing his neck and snarling that a disgusting monster like him could never kill him. Gunther gripped his head, retorted that he wasn't strong enough, then blew him apart, hurling his remains back into the sea of faces. He launched himself again, dodging an attack from Benzel while other vampires crawled up from below. He stopped for a second, turned, smashed one in the face with his fist, and followed it with an elbow strike into another, demanding to know why they weren't afraid of dying. The vampire dissolved, but instantly reformed again from the ground, grabbing his foot. He declared that they would always protect Benzel, because Benzel was the one who treated them with dignity. Their lives belonged to him. Gunther, baffled as to why they were acting like this, suddenly felt something. Benzel opened his jaws wide, clamping down on Gunther's head. The grotesque monster taunted that the boy seemed proud of his teeth, so this time he'd start with what mattered most. Gunther shut his eyes and fired upward, blasting through a column of heads, carving a path. He darted aside as another attack struck his back, grimly noting he only had 3 shots left. The problem was figuring out where Benzel was in that endless swarm of faces. He needed a solution. Then Arian's voice rang out. She was calling for Benzel. Gunther was confused, not understanding what she was doing, while other vampires closed in, ordering her to stay quiet. Gunther still didn't understand when suddenly a crimson slash flashed in front of him. It wasn't Benzel. It was another vampire. Gunther answered with a brutal punch to the head, finishing him off. He stepped back as the massive heads pressed forward again, while Arian screamed Benzel's name over and over, her voice desperate. Gunther didn't understand at first, until he noticed one of the vampires behind her telling her to shut up. Arian screamed again, calling Benzel a disgusting monster. Benzel, losing his composure, growled that no matter how much she stalled, it was pointless. But Arian shouted to Gunther to notice. Only certain faces reacted with expressions, and those same ones moved before the others, likely the ones closest to him. Just as she said it, a vampire clamped his hand over her mouth, threatening to rip out her tongue. But before he could, another blast tore through the middle of the faces. Gunther realized it clearly now. Some of them really did react faster than the rest. Through the hole he opened, he saw Benzel. The vampire screamed in panic that it didn't matter if they knew where he was. He could just shield himself with more heads and vanish again. He tried to reconstruct himself, but part of the neural link connecting the heads had already been severed. He knew he needed to reconnect quickly, but Gunther told him to hold still and fired again, tearing through part of his arm. The monster panicked, realizing he needed to flee, but Gunther only answered with a cold grin. Here comes the heroic shot. But at the same time, the vampires come at him from both sides, everyone diving toward him. He's practically submerged in a pool of monsters, but he fires another shot, direct hit, right in the head. Damn, the guy really has the aim. His finger trembles just slightly after the blast. Arian warns, to kill a vampire, you have to strike the heart, and now he's out of shots, which means they've lost. Gunther, however, asks what nonsense she's talking about losing, and keeps fighting, tearing through the vampires. He has only a flicker of energy left, preparing for one last leap, saying it's time for the final attack. Arian pleads with him not to, but he declares he's going in with his body. He launches himself at Benzel, who's in the middle of regenerating, but as it happens, Benzel accelerates the regeneration of his eyes, just to watch him coming closer. The next chapter begins with a strange, big-headed figure asking his father if sacrificing himself for humans was worth it. They treated him as a monster. His appearance was changed. Maybe it wasn't such a good thing. At that moment, he didn't know what to believe or what he should do, and now he realizes just how naive he was. Someone places a hand on his face. Apparently, it's Lord Julius, if I'm not mistaken, who tells him he's been watching him for a long time. Julius says he intends to create a new world, but the process will be painful and difficult, and he needs help from people like him. Honestly, it looks like this is Benzel, back when he was burned in the fire. He asks what kind of world Julius wants to create. Julius answers with something we don't hear, and the boy looks amazed, responding with something we also don't hear. Then Julius stretches out his hands, telling him to follow this path with him. The boy lowers his head and agrees. Back to the present, Gunther has driven his fist through Benzel's chest, smiling as he declares that this time he's won. Benzel's final question is how Gunther can still be a hero, even with that monstrous face. And with that, all the other vampires, desperate and panicked, begin to dissolve as Gunther loses consciousness. Sometime later, a carriage rolls through the forest. Gunther wakes up inside it. No arms, nothing left, only that device connected to his head. Arian tells him to move carefully. That thing is important and must not break. She also thanks him for his hard work. Thanks to him, countless lives were saved. Reiner praises him too. He never imagined the boy, reborn so recently, would already be capable of killing a high-ranked vampire. Gunther asks if the others died as well. Reiner confirms yes. They were all linked by Benzel's blood. The protagonist immediately concludes that the easiest way to solve everything is to kill the pure-blood vampires, since the rest will vanish. But Arian explains, unfortunately, the last pure-blood vampire, Julius, disappeared after the Emperor's death. Gunther asks how strong this Julius is and what his powers are. She admits no one knows. No one has ever survived a fight against him, or perhaps he never even fought at all. There are no stories to tell. Gunther finds that strange. Vampires usually drink blood to survive, so why is he killing humans instead? Reiner agrees, but sadly the only option is to defend themselves. He says they should head to headquarters. There Gunther will better understand what's really going on. Gunther asks if any human cities are still standing. The Bald One answers. The last surviving place is the Holy City, where all the survivors gather. It's a beautiful fortified place. It's also where they performed all their experiments and figured out how to create his body. It's the last stronghold of humanity, standing for over 100 years without falling. And honestly, it feels just like those stories where it all starts so hopeful, and then the Titans show up and bring it crashing down. At that moment, the Bald One steps out of the carriage and tells Gunther to take a good look at the city we'll have to protect with his very life. The entire place is in flames. Gunther, stunned, asks if that's just part of the scenery. The next chapter opens with a pale-haired boy jolting awake, startled by the news that Benzel is dead. He immediately jumps up, demanding to know who killed him, if it was the enemy. Then he bursts into tears, panicking that the enemy is coming to kill him too. Desperate, he screams that he doesn't want to die, until the massive shadow grips him and reassures him there's no enemy. The voice laments Benzel's death, saying he was such an adorable little vampire. But what he can't understand is whether a human could really have done it. It's hard to believe Benzel was killed by an ordinary being. Julius orders Ian to find the one responsible. A strange mouth flickers in the air and vanishes. Julius doesn't seem the least bit pleased by what's happened. We're then shown Bahal, the place known as the Holy Land. The biggest advantage for humanity settling there was its geography. It sat at the edge of a continent after a passage of countless mountains. The island itself provided enough land for farming. Around it, all was cliffs and jagged rock, nearly impossible to climb. And the only way in or out was a 1,200-meter bridge. With so much natural advantage, a single garrison could normally hold back 10 armies. So the question is, what's going on? Gunther demands to know why it looks like everything is being destroyed. Reiner admits he has no idea. When they left, the place was perfectly fine. At that moment, the Bald One calls out to someone named Leonard. Leonard, cheerful, says he's relieved the bald man is safe. He was worried he'd be the first to die. He glances at Arian, telling her she doesn't need to worry either. She made it back safely too. And not hiding his feelings, he adds that she can call him Leonard anytime she wants. Then he turns to Gunther, asking if he's really the one, clearly already aware of the experiment. When Leonard sees the device sticking out of Gunther's head, his expression darkens. He makes a clicking sound with his tongue, and Gunther immediately demands to know why this bastard is reacting like that. The Bald One tells Gunther to relax and explains Leonard is responsible for Bahal's defense force. Clearly, though, the job hasn't been going too well. Leonard tells everyone to follow. An urgent fire had just been dealt with. Gunther presses for an explanation of why the Holy Land is in such a state. Leonard explains that, unfortunately, the outer section of the bridge was abandoned. They couldn't defend it anymore. The Bald One comments it should have been easier now that Benzel is dead, but Leonard immediately doubts it, asking how that could be possible. Gunther answers flatly that of course it was him. Even then, Leonard doesn't look convinced. He makes another sharp click with his tongue before explaining. The moment they left the city, they were attacked by a force unlike anything they'd ever seen, something far beyond any vampire they'd ever heard of. He promises to show them the bizarre condition of the soldiers. Gunther scoffs, asking if this is supposed to be some kind of circus. Leonard, grim, says he wouldn't be joking once Gunther sees it himself. The Bald One asks if the city gates were really broken. Leonard nods. They were, and it was only by a miracle. The city didn't fall completely. That's why he wants Gunther to guard the bridge until everything is repaired. But the protagonist flatly refuses. He says he'd rather stay in the rear while the meat shields die up front. Leonard immediately calls him a shameless bastard, demanding if he has any idea why he's even standing there alive in front of them. 136 comrades volunteered to become Death Knights, and all of them died. Researchers worked endlessly to create those organs, and it's because of their sacrifice and the defense of this city that Gunther is alive at all. But as a gladiator, he never really understood what sacrifice meant. His whole life had been about hurting others just to stay alive. The truth is, the one who should have died was him, not Gunther. The guy even admits he feels jealous. Well, go ahead, sign yourself up. If you die, you die. Gunther stares him down, walks closer, and says, "You're a real straight-laced guy, huh? Every time I meet someone like you, I just feel like saying straight to your face, go to hell." The man reaches for his sword, saying he'll settle it right now. The guy's completely insane, right? Might as well just punch him and get it over with. I was joking, but the next chapter actually opens with him getting hurled out of the building and smashing into the ground. He really did take a punch. Arian warns Gunther to be careful and not to act so aggressively while he's still recharging. Damn, it takes forever to recharge. He's not even at full capacity yet. Gunther brushes it off, telling her to relax. It was just self-defense. The sun is setting now, and that idiot's all bandaged up because of our boy, who mutters it should have ended with just one hit anyway. Arian tells Gunther he has to restrain himself. There's no way he can win this war alone. And one thing the other guy wasn't lying about is how much it costs humanity to build each part of Gunther's body. Countless resources, countless sacrifices. On top of that, all the components are constantly decaying, which means they always need more and more people offering limbs and materials. She's trying her best to save as many lives as possible and protect the Holy Land so the source of his power doesn't get cut off. Gunther listens to all this and simply asks if she's not just telling him to fight on the front lines. She answers that of course she is, that's the easiest way for them to win. He gives up arguing and says fine, but in that case he wants a new weapon. The bald one tells him to come take a look at the modifications they got. Gunther sees something like an arm with a mouth on it and has no idea what the hell it is. The protagonist is unsettled, while Arian asks if they really didn't produce anything else. Leonard, who's suddenly acting all friendly, explains that they had to defend the city, so there wasn't time to make much more. Gunther, on the other hand, is furious, saying they should have made him a normal arm instead of this abomination of a mouth arm. But the bald man insists it's perfect. The bite force is immense. Plus, it comes with a flesh shield. That thing's insane. Arian explains that with his own willpower, he can expand or shrink it at will. And obviously, it's tougher than any other part of his body, even resistant to fire. Gunther, though, says he'd rather have something like that bone launcher. Now that was badass, even if it only had 6 shots. But Arian explains it took 6 months to build that one. Every weapon requires an absurd amount of ingredients and human effort. And aside from that, they still desperately need arms and legs. The rest of the materials are somewhat easier to get. Gunther asks if they really have nothing else. She replies, unfortunately, it's wartime. At the door, Leonard says he has to return to protecting the city and wishes them both a good evening. After that beating, he really is acting polite now. Later that night, Gunther is holding a sword, muttering that finally he has something to get him ready for the fight. Arian then explains that just like that man said, creating the Death Knight required over 100 people working together, plus the support of the aristocrats and the royal family. Everyone agreed he was the perfect choice. So he doesn't need to care about what anyone else says. She believes in him. Only he can save this world. Gunther, however, says he doesn't give a damn about that. She replies that having that kind of attitude shows he's lucky. But right then, the protagonist brings up the 136 people who died trying to become human batteries. She looks a little thoughtful, and Gunther wants to know why. After seeing so many die trying to become human batteries, she still chose to take on that role. She answers simply that it was something that had to be done. He just stares at her and says he doesn't get it. Sometime later, he's at the window, watching closely to see if anything shows up. Suddenly, Leonard barges in, telling him to get ready. The vampires have returned. Gunther's been hooked up to that device all day, apparently to keep his battery charged at maximum. Now it makes sense. They disconnect him, and Arian tells him he must come back alive. He's far too important. Gunther just throws on his helmet and says survival is his specialty. Shield activated, he now looks every bit like the Death Knight, warning that whenever comes out of the shadows, he'll tear it apart. From the forest, a twisted creature emerges, wondering why today's audience is only one person. Gunther stares, curious why the thing's body is so contorted and why it moves so sluggishly. He immediately crouches, preparing to launch, and hurls himself forward faster than a vampire. He intends to end it in one strike. But the monster, still at a distance, greets him and declares that to please the audience, he'll give his very best. He calls out to someone named Evelyn and says the first act of the performance is about to begin. The King of Pigs, and he's cut off mid-sentence by Gunther, who slashes forward, claiming victory. The problem? His blade didn't cut anything. The strike was perfect. So how the hell did this thing dodge? The creature starts crying, asking why Gunther is being so rude. He should have followed the proper performance. Then a boy twisted on the ground calls out that it's the show of the King of Pigs and the dwarf, and it's time to begin. He slits his hand, blood rises, and out of nowhere, a circus tent materializes. Gunther realizes Leonard's words about this being like a circus were literal. Curtains spread open, and from within, an attack bursts forth. Gunther blocks, and a pig-faced man is hurled aside. But alongside him, more small ones come rushing in. The dwarf and his pigs, all charging at once, explosions shaking the ground. Gunther rips through them with ease, carving them apart. He blocks another strike, slices down one more, cuts another charging from the side, and pins one to the ground, pressing down until the blade tears him apart. Furious, Gunther mutters that these weaklings are just wasting his time. Needing to end things quickly, he shreds another and sprints straight toward the tent. His plan: take the leader's head. But from within, a warped mouth laughs and suddenly flames erupt. Gunther raises his shield, blocking the inferno. Then, out comes the same demon from earlier, riding atop a massive, hulking brute. Gunther instantly realizes this must be the so-called king. The demon riding on his back declares that the king destroys all enemies of the people. Another torrent of flames roars forth. Gunther blocks once more. The pig-masked monster bellows that the king's fire burns everything, that Gunther won't be able to take another step. But Gunther calmly holds his ground behind the shield, leaving the beast baffled. The demon orders the king to increase the flames further. The fire intensifies, but Gunther only asks if they seriously believe that's enough. He hurls his sword, spinning like a boomerang into the king's face. In the very same instant the beast flinches, Gunther rushes through, smashing them both apart with a devastating punch. He catches his sword on the other side and remarks that he expected this fight to be tougher. Yeah, he absolutely demolished them. But true, when the creature first appeared, he called this the first act. Gunther smirks and says to bring on the second performance already. He keeps walking through the tent until at the far end he finds what looks like a sword with something attached to the tip. Around him are all kinds of equipment that look like torture devices, and he remarks that the decorations here are quite charming. The demon, crying, thanks him, stammering that he's not used to anyone ever reaching this second performance. That's why he had prepared it so carefully. Gunther slashes again, but once more, his blade doesn't touch anything. He curses, wondering what kind of body this monster has that he can't land a hit. The vampire slits his hand, saying it's time for the second performance. Blood merges with his body as he announces the clown's confession of suffering. Evelyn, fully transformed, he tells Gunther to enjoy the show as the whole place begins to collapse around them. Gunther charges to strike, but the monster leaps away. The protagonist mutters that the bastard is way too fast, but he wants to see how long it'll last. Gunther kicks, sending rocks flying, but the creature blurs into a thin line, dodging everything. Gunther glares as the creature pulls two swords from its mouth and charges. He blocks with his shield. Another flurry of slashes, blades clashing violently. Gunther parries, counters with a leap and slash, but again the monster twists into a line and slips away. He has no idea how to land a hit on something like this. Then the creature aims straight for his helmet, smashing him backward. In the very next second, it bursts out of the tent in a spinning strike. Explosions rock the area. From afar, Leonard observes that Gunther seems to be under heavy pressure. It's hard to see, but clear enough, the knight's attacks aren't working at all. Worse, he's already been forced back to the start of the bridge. The bald one urges them to bring out whatever they have. He wants to see it, while Arian looks visibly worried. Sure enough, Gunther is now on the bridge, clashing with the monster's flurries. He ducks under one strike, counters, but again the creature dissolves into a line. He growls that the bastard moves like a worm. The monster retaliates with another strike, detonations rattling the bridge. Arian observes that this creature seems able to detect any attack within a certain range of awareness. The bald one asks if there's anything they can do to help. Leonard explains that, unfortunately, all siege weapons were destroyed in the last battle. Arian adds that fighting on the bridge must be avoided. They have to remember that Gunther's body is pure muscle with almost no fat. If he falls into the water, he'll inevitably drown. Then comes another strike. Gunther is thrown off the bridge. At that exact moment, Arian shouts that if he falls, it's over. But instead of plunging into the river, only rocks splash down. Gunther managed to jam his sword into the bridge's edge, stopping his fall. Still, he knows if he goes into the river, the raging current will make escape nearly impossible. As he climbs back up, he glances at the gauge on his arm. Time is running out fast. This fight will be brutal. From above, the monster smirks eerily and descends toward him. Somehow, Gunther manages to vault back up onto the bridge, but his arm is gone. When did that happen? Maybe during the king's fire earlier, when he charged through? It must have been destroyed, and that explains why he hasn't used his shield in a while. The twisted creature grins, saying Gunther is strong, far stronger than the last ones. But now it's time for Arian and the bald one to act. Both call out to Gunther, issuing a direct order: retreat. If there's one thing Gunther knows how to do, it's survive. In an instant, he's already sprinted back through the gates inside the castle. The doors slam shut behind him. He immediately asks if they came up with any ideas during the fight. The bald one admits they're still trying to devise a plan. Arian says the perfect plan is to hold that monster on the bridge until sunrise. They have no siege weapons, no proper arms for him, and Gunther still can't take on a vampire like that alone. The sun will rise in 5 hours, but the problem is that his limit is only 2, which means he'll have to go out, fight, come back to recharge, and then return to battle again. The bald one tells him to wait a moment. Hell replace his arm. Gunther asks if that's really the best solution. Arian answers that the one fatal flaw in this strategy is that it takes longer than he thinks for him to recover. Gunther asks how long, and she says that for him to fight for 2 hours, they need 20 minutes of recharge. Oh, well, that's not so bad, he thinks. Of course, there's a demonic monster outside, which makes it risky, but still, it could have been worse. But the bald one adds, he has to be in a stable condition for the recharge to work. He can't just abandon the vampire, and on top of that, he has to protect both himself and Arian. Gunther thinks it would be nearly impossible to do all that at once. At that moment, Leonard throws the door open, gives Gunther a hard stare, and shuts it again. Turning to the soldiers, he orders them to hold for at least 20 minutes. No matter what, Gunther mutters that this guy's lost his mind. He must have seen him fight that vampire, so he should know there's no chance at all. In 20 minutes, everyone will be dead. Raynor responds that they already know that. Even so, they're chosen to fight and protect the city. The soldiers stand there, trembling, but with shields and spears raised at the ready. And Leonard delivers the epic line: "If we don't burn here and now, then who else will drive back the darkness?" The door bursts apart and chaos erupts. Outside, soldiers scream desperately, shouting to hold fire, shouting to attack, while blood seeps in under the door. At first, it looks like Gunther is laughing, but no. He's just standing there with his eyes shut, trying to hold himself together. Outside, the soldiers are being torn apart. Leonard falls to the ground, and a monster looms over him, about to strike. He raises his shield, head being crushed, but still blocks the first hit. The monster goes in for a second strike. And then Gunther tears through the wall, firing his bone launcher arm, clamping down with that monstrous bite. "You let yourself get distracted," he growls. "Didn't think an attack could come from the wall, huh?" Leonard, shocked, demands to know what Gunther is doing there. He just started his recharge. Even the bald one is impressed that the single-arm strike worked. Gunther thinks to himself, everyone knows he can't hold this fight here for long with all these people around. It only took him 5 minutes to recover. He can keep this battle going until morning. That's because he's going to drag this monster somewhere else. With that, he hurls himself off the bridge with the creature, crashing into the sea below, declaring that now neither of them will escape. Underwater, he grips the monster with one arm, hammering punches into its stomach. He laughs, asking what the bastard thinks of fighting in a place like this. He swears he'll crush its heart with his bare hand. The monster thrashes, coiling around him like a snake, stabbing its sword into his arm. Because of the human battery connection, his first limb is easily torn off. The mouth arm snaps a chunk of flesh before he takes another stab, this one straight through his gut. Both of them scream, thrashing the black water. The monster tries to swim upward, but Gunther surges from below and bites into its stomach. He snarls that this alone won't be enough to kill it. With that bite, the creature's heart is exposed. It swings again for another strike, just as Gunther goes in for another bite. And then a woman's voice, reminds him, "Back in that wasteland where no one survived and not a single living thing existed, you called out to me." She once heard the faint cry of someone dying, screaming with every bit of strength left. As she drew closer, she felt relief, but then curiosity struck. This was a world no one would ever choose to be born into. And yet, even someone who had been born in a wasteland left to rot still desperately wanted to survive. For a time, she wondered if his cries were really for salvation. And now, standing before him with bodies scattered everywhere, she says she has her answer. The boy, beaten and broken, asks what she means by that. Suddenly, the strange woman grabs his face and tells him he always wanted revenge. No one wants to be born into this world. No one wants to keep living here. Even so, he screamed to be saved with everything he had. He was born with that will to survive like a starving dog. And that drive, that will, comes from his desire to take revenge on those who put him in this world and on those who abandoned him. Gunther closes his eyes and says yes. She tells him to get ready for the next fight. He'll have to prove his will. Suddenly, someone calls his name, and all that's left is his head, grinning with that crazy smile. It looks like he really did die by drowning. But luckily, because his head was severed and the brain remained intact, he's still alive. His body was too heavy, packed with muscle to be recovered, but his head floated. Arian picks him up, thanking him for still being alive, while Leonard tells him to hurry, because the fight isn't over yet. Damn, only the head survived. Give the guy a break already. Reinhard is shocked, seeing just his head being revived, reacting strangely, trying to make sense of what Gunther is saying. Arian calms him, explaining he can't properly speak without a torso. The new body is almost finished. He just has to wait a little. Still, his head twitches unnervingly. Sometime later, he's restored and mutters that the last fight was boring as hell. He asks if more vampires showed up. Leonard says no, that thing is probably still alive. Gunther insists that's impossible. He bit through the creature's heart. Leonard replies that he wants to believe it too, but where they found Gunther's head, they also saw footprints leading out of the water. He followed the tracks and found a strange carriage, likely belonging to vampires. Since they had no chance of winning outright, the priority was recovering Gunther's body. Gunther refuses to believe it, telling them to just look at his teeth. He shredded the monster's heart. Leonard concedes, but insists they need to check anyway, just to be sure. The group creeps through the bushes, and sure enough, they spot a suspicious carriage. Leonard tells Gunther to check it out, but to be extremely careful. As Gunther approaches, he sees the footprints are indeed fresh. The windows are covered, clearly a vampire hiding from the sun. And if a high-ranked vampire is inside, this could be his best chance to gain an advantage. He slowly reaches the door, opens it, and finds the carriage empty. He steps inside and hears an eerie laugh echoing. The door slams shut. In the same instant, something lunges at his head from the side, but he blocks it. A brawl erupts in the dark. He can't see a thing. One of those small knife-wielding dwarves knocks him outside, and Gunther orders the others not to interfere. Another strange one appears, carrying a little shack on his head, announcing that the slayer of the Pig King has arrived. Gunther demands to know why they're so weak if they're vampires. The creature explains they struggle to walk and fight because they are all failed births. Worse still, some are failures born from other failures, twisted upon twisted. Gunther sneers and he doesn't care. He throws one aside and declares it's time to wipe them all out, because they kill humans without hesitation. The one with the little house on his back trembling says it's fine. Just follow him and he'll lead the way to the final performance. Gunther follows, surrounded by countless others watching. He mutters that the squealing pig noises they make are ridiculous, especially since they're not even pigs. The creature explains that it's because they weren't created as humans but rather as plump pigs, which is why they sound like that. He pulls back a curtain and announces it's time to see the most beautiful creation of them all. There she is, the strange one, Evelyn. Gunther steps in glaring and she greets him by saying the audience has arrived. He demands to know how she's still alive when he already ate her heart. She explains that a vampire doesn't die unless the entire heart is destroyed. He only took a bite out of a part of it. The only problem now is that because her heart is no longer whole, she can't use the power of blood anymore. Gunther thanks her, saying it's very kind of her to explain everything so clearly. But now she's nothing more than a shadow waiting for the sun. With that, he charges in, declaring that this time she won't survive. Meanwhile, outside, Leonard asks how much time the guy still has. They say 50, and the plan is that if another 10 go by without any news, they'll try to go and help. At that point, one of the knights asks if those vampires were ever human. Leonard, confused, doesn't really get it. Then the guy tells him about a story he once heard, about the children in a city called Trumps, where the orphans kept disappearing. While they were searching for them, they found a strange place, a basement with no sunlight at all, filled with tools meant for breaking human bones, all sorts of metals and weird objects. And there, at the back of the room, piles of broken skeletons stacked up, and they all clearly looked like they belonged to young humans. The guy next to him wants to know what was going on in that place. The man just explains that he heard products were being manufactured there. Apparently, they were making and selling bizarre humans, and the smaller and more deformed they were, the more expensive they were sold for. The guy says it's ridiculous. Who would buy something like that? The chemist answers that it was just gossip, he has no idea. But rumors said it was probably wealthy merchants and nobles. That's because having a servant who was extremely small was like a symbol of power, as if it were a jewel, some kind of rare material. The man says he gets it, but why would anyone do something like that to a person? The other explains that maybe it was because they already had everything in this world, and unless it was something unusual and rare, they didn't want it. The end of the story says that some of the survivors from that place were sold to a circus. He thought it was an exaggerated story, nonsense really, but maybe those there had been the victims. Then he drops the heavy question and asks the captain if the barrel they're protecting, the people behind that bridge, are they really worth it? And man, while they're lost in this whole philosophy, the protagonist smashes the door down with his sword. The vampire jumps and says they suffocated him, scraped him, and broke his bones. The horrendous pain never ended. Even when he cried and begged to be killed, they ignored him. Until one day, suddenly, they let him go and told him he was free. He asked why. Why all that torment, all that pain, all that time? And why, out of nowhere, he was given that so-called freedom? That's when the man with the feather in his hat said, "Evelyn, the trend has passed." Damn. Evelyn laughs, then her face hardens and she stares at him again. She says she wants to ask one last thing. What's the trend now? Stories with systems and stories with a protagonist who blows money on women. That's what's popular. Anything else, she can be informed. Gunther says that for him, the trend is, no matter what happens, he survives in the end. It's the story of a man. The whole scene with Evelyn first shows her face silent, then her reaction, saying it's something difficult. Yes, definitely a lonely performance. And man, the carriage is shattered, sunlight hits, and she's completely turned to ashes. Damn, it ended a bit anticlimactic. But I think that was intentional, just to leave us heavy with that psychological weight. Meanwhile, back in Bahal, they're talking about how it looks like he already killed 2 high-ranking vampires. And according to what people say, there are about 6 more around Bahal. Knowing this, the guy says he's really going to have a lot to face. A scared one comments that they're going to have to help him because, yeah, he won't be able to handle it alone. But the stubborn one tells him to stop being crazy. Why should he care about those people who aren't worth anything? Besides, they had a natural fortress connected to the continent. Their side past the sea had a much better chance of surviving. Not to mention, vampires hate water. Has he ever heard of a vampire swimmer? And right at that moment, they hear a thud, then another thud, and the guy asks what that is. We're not going to find out right now because we're seeing Gunther in a suit asking if they're really going to a festival when everything's ruined. She says yes, it's time to celebrate the death of 2 high-ranking vampires. And it looks like she's visiting the region outside. Gunther says she seems to be an impressive person, doing something like this when life and time are on the line. The bald one replies that the person coming is the current leader of Bahal. Still, it was best for Gunther not to say anything weird to her, because that would just be a massive headache. He doesn't quite get it, but then a carriage approaches and someone announces that her grace is arriving, an only heir of pure lineage, Her Majesty Queen Olivia Hound. Everyone welcomes her and bows while Gunther just stares at the troublemaker. Yeah, she looks like a sly one. For a second, you can already tell. Oh, an artist, she's got talent. But she's also a spoiled brat, complaining that the place is dirty and smells strange. The man nearby apologizes while Gunther mutters that it's insane for her to say something like that in the middle of a battlefield. Obviously, it stinks. At once, the bald one is trembling, while the protagonist couldn't care less. She, however, walks right up and says he must be the so-called corpse knight. She gets close, looks him over, and says he's pretty ugly, probably because his body was modified. Still, she heard he already took down 2 high-ranking vampires, and she personally came to praise him for everything he's done. One of the men beside her claps, saying he's an example, fighting that hard for the people and for the queen's heart. She thanks them for the compliments, but says it's better to go inside and get away from this filth. Inside one of the houses, cobwebs everywhere. She still complains that the place is dirty. "Oh, Queen, I honestly can't wait for you to get knocked around, then saved by our corpse knight, only for him to be such a chad that he smacks you right on the head." The brown-haired man says everyone will be punished harshly for the mess, but she answers that it's fine, it's wartime, and she'll be generous and just this once understanding. At that moment, she calls for Gunther and asks what reward he wants. Arian answers instead, saying what they really need are more men and materials for support. She reminds everyone that countless nobles and royals had doubted the corpse knight, but now that the plan worked and this is a way to bring an end to the war, they need more help to sustain everything. That's why she asks for total support now, so they can take large steps toward peace. The queen, though, glances at her and asks if she's an Aryan. Even if she acknowledges the girl's merits, how can she provide all that support with her limited resources? She, Olivia Hound, as the last true descendant of the royal family, always needs to invest in countless future possibilities to keep her chances alive. So for now, the support Aryan gets is the best she's going to get. That's a fact that won't change. Gunther immediately blurts out, "What the hell is she even saying?" The bald one explains that she thought this plan would fail, so they invested in many other weapons. Gunther then raises his voice, and she hears it, so she can't even admit that her plan and her decisions were wrong. Aryan, a bit downcast, says that at the very least she should give official recognition to those who sacrificed themselves as part of the plan. The brown-haired man calls her rude, but the queen answers again, saying she always wanted the research and had demanded that the project be carried out in secret. She always found it disgusting, this business of bringing back a dead person to be used as a knight. After all, something like that would only stain the honor and reputation of the royal family. That's why nothing can be made official. Otherwise, the knight's existence would become public, and that would be bad for everyone. She then declares the reward will be the title of Count, along with the fertile territory down in the southern region. The odd fellow beside her pipes up again, praising the queen as incredible, flawless in her judgment. And man, then she stretches out her little hand and says to come closer and give it a kiss if they accept the reward. Gunther glares and mutters he can't stand this nonsense. In a situation where no one knows if they're going to die today or tomorrow, she's there rambling about honor and pride. Looks like they brought in some crazy woman claiming to be the queen. Humanity's doomed. The guys in the back are all apologizing to Her Majesty while telling Gunther to shut up. And now the queen herself starts to lose it and orders the protagonist to shut his mouth. Oh no, now I'm rooting for her to get beaten to death by a vampire, while Gunther just stands there laughing in her face. Then 2 men burst through the door and Leonard warns that danger is coming. A massive creature was heading straight for Bahal. Outside, watching, the bald one tells Gunther not to lose his mind, but Gunther replies that everyone's going to die anyway, including himself, so he's not about to respect that weird woman. Aryan doesn't even care, she just wants to know if it's true Toronto was destroyed in a single night. The blonde guy answers yes, that thing showed up in an instant and wiped everything out on the spot. Just a few punches and nothing was left. Gunther says it doesn't make sense. Talking about strong punches like that, they're supposed to be talking about a vampire. But that's when the bald man starts trembling, asking what the hell that thing was looming on the horizon. Dear God, it really was a Titan. Attack on Titan, here we go. Our boy's about to turn into Eren Yeager. Maybe every short guy's dream can come true, connecting those 50-meter legs. Of course, with each step, everything was being destroyed. And the protagonist asks if the meaning of the word vampire hasn't gotten a little twisted. How could that thing be a vampire? Aryan explains that a vampire is just someone who uses the power of blood, and as far as she knows, high-ranking ones with enough strength and willpower can do whatever they want, shape and change whatever they want with their blood. That vampire was probably the one known as the Iron Titan Miranda. Look at him even kick down the capital's walls. Oh, you sleep bastard, I caught the reference. And of course, no bullet, no weapon. Nothing worked against that skin of his that looked as hard as steel. She'd already heard the rumors, but seeing him face to face like this was terrifying. Gunther comments that for someone nobody had ever actually seen, he seems pretty famous. She says yes, that's exactly why countless studies have been done trying to find his weakness. He tells her to spill it, and she says it's simple. None. He doesn't have a weakness. They're already rushing the carriages, and she explains that unfortunately, that's all the information they've got. Nobody's ever managed to cut his skin, so no one knows what's inside. Both of them, however, reach the same conclusion. If that thing enters Bahal, the whole city falls. Arian says that's why they always try to track the monster. Gunther wants to know where it's headed. The bald one answers that obviously they have no idea. Apparently Miranda always moves spontaneously. But Arian insists, just like any other, he must burn in the sun. Gunther finds that suspicious. Something that size would need a peculiar place to hide. But she shakes her head. She says that when the sun rises, he transforms into another form that's not a titan. And it's at that moment, right after the transformation, that he has to be killed. That's the only thing she believes could work. Gunther realizes it's basically a deadly game of hide and seek. The bald one says that looking at the map today at the speed he's moving, he still won't reach Bahal. So they've got a few days to prepare. At this pace, he'll probably hole up in some ruined village with lots of buildings. And if they can find him there, odds are high that tomorrow he'll enter Bahal. Meaning, the winner of this fight will be decided in that village. They arrive already spotting the gigantic footprints. At least that makes it easy to track him. As soon as Gunther gets there, he wants the perfect answer. Somebody point me to where the freak is. But Leonard replies that first they'll have to check the 120 houses in that place, starting from the south. He asked the queen for troops, but unfortunately there weren't that many available. The man in front replied that the queen had ordered most of them to stay at the base and reinforce the defenses. Gunther laughs, saying it's clear her pride matters more than any human life. But with no time to waste, Leonard just orders everyone to start searching. They had to split into groups, go into each house, and check as much as possible. So here we are with them going in, pulling everything apart, investigating drawers, boxes, even breaking down doors. Gunther steps inside and asks himself, where the hell is that damn Iron Titan? The bastard was a huge, muscle-bound giant, so he figured it had to be a big human too. That's why he was focused on open spaces instead of tight ones. He walks up to a door, punches it, and says this looks perfect. A soldier reports that nothing has been found yet. The sun's still up, and the bald one thinks something's off, only a few houses left. Ariel replies that he could be hiding in a way that's hard to imagine. Gunther stomps the ground, frustrated, saying he's already destroyed more than 10 houses and hasn't found anything, not even a rat, let alone a vampire. Suddenly, footsteps echo along the hallway. He pauses, confused, steps outside, and runs after them. As he rounds the corner, there's something covered in what looks like a black cloth. He squints, asking himself what that strange mouth was supposed to be. The scene shifts to Lord Julius, and that mouth is whispering in his ear. Now he knows the immortal knight is there and the shadow confirms it. The man is sure, another one of Bahal's creations. The big-mouthed one wants to know what this Bahal is that all the humans keep talking about. All he knows is it's the only city left intact. Julius then explains that Bahal is actually where it all began. That's why he's been dragging things out, because it also needs to end there, and the time has come. The sharp-toothed one says that if that's the order, he'll tell Miranda. Julius says fine, but he also wants the immortal knight brought to him. The sun keeps sinking, and just then, one of the houses explodes. The bald one's already calling out for Gunther. When he gets inside, he asks if it's a vampire. But instead, a boy is stepping out with a bear on his shoulder. He asks if this could be the creature, but they all say it's impossible. The sun would set in an hour, and now they're screwed, because if it's not here, it's already moved on. Leonard orders them to resume the search, while Gunther complains that it's impossible to find something when they don't even know what they're looking for. Arian just says it's the only option, they don't have many people here, and there's no other way to handle it. Then Leonard suggests they burn all the houses down. If there's anything hiding inside, human or not, it'll show itself. Arian thinks it's too risky, with the forests all around. The whole island could go up in flames. Gunther tells him to give it up, that they should look for another solution. But the bald one refuses, saying they can't back out, because if they do, the next battlefield will be Bahal. He reminds Gunther that he was created for the plan to protect that city. Giving up was never an option. It was time for everyone to search again. He takes off running, and Gunther is left confused until Leonard explains that Rainer's family is in Bahal. He's got a daughter he cares for deeply. Gunther smirks and says the bald guy finally managed to do something worthwhile with his life, while Leonard shouts for everyone to keep searching and not give up. Time passes, and Rainer realizes there's nothing here. The sun is just about to set when he hears a sound behind him. He turns around. Inside a box, something is shaking. Suddenly, the entire house is blown apart, and something starts rising. He's thrown back from the impact while Gunther mutters that he knew something like this was bound to happen. Now everyone was screwed. Arian asks what happened, and the bald one explains that he found it. In that situation, at that moment, he should have killed it. The protagonist wants to know what he means by not killing it when he had the chance. Then he explains that inside the box, what he found was a child. Gunther is shocked, but right in front of them, the Titan rises. As soon as the beast takes form, it winds up a punch and hurls it straight at the trio. Next chapter, the soldiers are trying to flee, but the monster stomps down on them, and from a distance he can already see the city. Gunther shows up carrying a pillar, spins it 3 times and throws it, but it smacks the Titan's arm like it was nothing but a toothpick. He leaps up and throws a punch too, and nothing happens. Just like they had warned, that skin couldn't be pierced. He keeps punching, slashing left and right, but nothing works, until even his arm breaks apart. Then the monster shifts, raising its hand to smack him down, but he dodges. He keeps climbing up its arm, thinking that no matter how strong something is, everything has a weakness. Another strike comes, the beast claps his palms together, but he slips out again and keeps climbing. Still, in the middle of this chase, he suddenly loses his grip, and the Titan manages to catch him by the foot. Looking straight into its eye, Gunther wonders if this is the spot that might be exposed. But then, damn, the monster flicks him, and the kid is completely disintegrated. At the same time, the Queen sees the Titan approaching. It was effortlessly crossing the ocean. The Queen declares there's no such thing as an immortal vampire. She hasn't met any high-ranking ones, but she's seen plenty of low-ranked vampires killed by normal people. That's why she says they don't need that filthy night. Oh, Queen, do us a favor and die in as much pain as possible. Then SIP number 1 shows up saying all the adjustments are complete, and they're ready for launch. They have built a massive wall of spear parts. But really, if one spear doesn't pierce, throwing 50,000 of them won't change anything. 50,000 spears still won't go in. The man insists they have 100 gigantic arrows with the tension force of 100 horses. The monster's skin would be pierced easily, and its heart ripped out. They'd win without leaving a trace of it. The Queen laughs, saying that the moment it falls, everyone will recognize her as the true emperor, the one who rules humanity. She orders everyone to witness the power of the royal family. Raising her hands, glaring ahead, she commands the shot to be fired. Meanwhile, the others are gathering around what's left of Gunther, and the bald man says he can't believe it. Is this what remains of humanity's hope? He tells himself he should have been more resolute. If he hadn't hesitated for a single second, none of this would have happened. He's right. He has a daughter in the city, and he hesitated to kill that pale kid in the box. Arian looks sad over Gunther when suddenly something drops beside them. It's a piece of his head with a little hand, trying to say he's still alive. That's when they realize he had been up in the tree this whole time. Arian thanks him right there, saying she's glad he survived, while he, poor guy, can't even speak. Soon they're in the carriage, with Gunther asking for new parts. He couldn't open his mouth properly, but Rainer keeps watching and manages to translate something. Since he can't open his mouth, attack the eyes. Arian says she understands, but even if they destroy the eye, the heart will still be intact. Then he whispers something else to Rainer, who translates it. He's basically going to enter the body through the eye and run straight to the heart. Arian pauses to think and admits that if they can enter through the eye like that, they might actually have a chance. The problem is figuring out how to reach the head in the first place. Just then, they hear the volley, endless sequence of arrows fired at the Titan, slamming straight into its chest. Everyone knew this was the weapon the Queen had prepared, and it did look pretty strong. But guess what? When the smoke clears, a Titan is standing there intact, not a single one pierced through. One of the men states the obvious on the wall. The Titan didn't fall, and it's still closing in. Another rushes over and asks the Queen what they should do, but she demands to know the next plan. The man hesitates to explain while she bites down in rage, and with that, the Titan is reaching the city. Meanwhile, the bald one is still blaming himself, saying he should have been more decisive. Suddenly, someone shouts for their father, then runs up to hug him. She's carrying a four-armed Gunther on her back, saying she's glad he's safe. No wonder he's the great general. Rainer calls out to Audrey, demanding why she hasn't evacuated yet. He told her once it got close, she was supposed to retreat, but she shows that she brought along a piece of the corpse knight's body. And on top of that, her hair was already falling out from stressing about her father. Turns out, she's huge and muscular. That's why she says the bald man should worry about himself instead of her. He realizes she's right while the protagonist is in Arian's arms, struggling to mumble something. The odd girl steps up, reaching her hand out, saying she wants to greet him. She's excited to finally meet him, but he just stares at her hand, glaring with even more anger, unsure if she's mocking him. The girl apologizes, and Arian says they don't have time. They need to connect body parts 253 and 350. They were going to climb the Titan's body. Audrey then says if it's piece 350, she's already done something similar. She'll connect that piece and bring back a crucial part. The bald one starts to say it seems like the footsteps have stopped when suddenly, right in front of him, the Titan's kick lands square on the girl. Damn, that hurt to watch. I thought she was going to be that cool, tough character, but instead she got torn apart. Phew, thankfully not. The next chapter starts with Rainer saving her at the last moment. The problem is he's about to fall himself, and the spot he's clinging to is breaking apart. She yells at him to stop being crazy, to take this part of the corpse, the most important one, and deliver it to the knight. The place where they're holding on is collapsing, but then man, the protagonist, a hero. He clamps onto the piece with nothing but his mouth, biting down on the bald man's arm. That's all he has left, a head and one arm. He's making garbled sounds while the bald man doesn't understand. All the while, the Titan is advancing, tearing through the city. People are being evacuated, and Leonard orders everyone toward the edges of the island. That's when the Queen shows up, asking how long his men can hold out. He answers that at this rate, they won't last through the night. She asked about the corpse knight, and he says it looks like they're preparing to fight the Titan in a different way. The Queen remarks that by the looks of it, everyone's going to die anyway, since this is an island with just one way in and out. At least if no one's left alive, there will be nobody around to judge her, which in the end wasn't so bad, was it? Somebody please kill her, that's all I ask, is probably exactly what Leonard's thinking right then. The scene shifts to the production area, and our boy has a giant frog hand piece clamped in his mouth. He latches it onto the bald man's head and sucks it into place. He says at least the adhesion works really well. Rainer explains that it's a weapon made from the arm of some lizard beast, meant to stick so he can climb. Meanwhile, the bald man thanks him for saving him. Gunther snaps back that he didn't save anybody. What he saved was the body part he needed. He couldn't care less if the bald guy had died, who now had a huge scar on his head. The bald man just mutters that Gunther is always like this. There must have been a moment when he remembered being happy in the presence of someone else. He looks up and asks, "What the hell is this?" and wants to know if he's joking. His relatives didn't even have the courage to kill him, so they just tossed what was left of the fetus into the trash heap. Or maybe he should have been happy back in the arena, where the only choice was kill or be killed. A place where the only value his life had was the money people bet on the winner. He tells him to stop being funny, because there was never anything happy or interesting in his life. Up until now, the only people around him were either trying to kill him or trying to take him down. And yet, even so, he survived. Because even if the entire world wanted him dead, he would keep fighting and surviving. Nothing in the world was more valuable than that, so he wants to compete and see who's still alive in the end. And he's sure it'll be him. But Rainer then says that a life where all you want is to survive is a life where you have nothing. Gunther stares him down, but then the others announce that the parts have been connected. The protagonist pulls the piece off his head and rises with 4 arms. Arian calls out to him, but he doesn't respond. She finally says that she'd like to see him tomorrow. He turns, saying that's a joke, and leaves the room staring straight at the Titan. Meanwhile, out at the edge of the city, almost falling into the sea, people can only watch as the Titan gets closer. Then suddenly, it looks down and sees something climbing up its leg. It's Gunther, rushing up at full speed. The Titan swings a palm to crush him, but Gunther leaps, latches on with his extra hands, and keeps climbing. Damn, he's fast now, already scaling the Titan's back. He knew at this pace the monster wouldn't be able to grab him, but the thing's absurdly flexible. It slaps him, sending him flying. Gunther crashes to the ground, looks at his arm, and says it happened again. So he leaps back toward the Titan, starts scaling the bridge of rubble. The beast swings a fist, but he jumps, steps off a falling stone, and launches upward. He grabs hold again with the lizard hand piece, but the bastard manages another blow. He dodges underneath, moves along the other arm. More swings come one after another. He slips around, but now it looks like he's been slammed into the ground. Except not, because when the monster punched, he clung to the edge of its hand. And there, under the strike, he notices something strange, like a hidden spot beneath the island. He doesn't understand why something so odd is there, but his thought is cut short as the beast shakes its arm violently, flings him to the ground, and comes down with another crushing strike. From afar, Arian calls out Gunther's name. He's already lost a leg. Gunther, stop losing limbs already. Another strike rips through the city and slices off one of his lizard arms. The creature glares down as he screams in desperation, clinging on until finally he reaches the Titan's nape. At that moment, all he needed was for the monster to be distracted for just a second. And right then, the Titan, about to grab him, suddenly turns its gaze aside as if it saw someone or something. It freezes for a brief moment, and that's when Gunther hurls himself upward, landing on its head. The monster reaches to snatch him, but then something strange happens, because the next chapter begins with a little doll. The child holds it, saying she couldn't do anything while her brother was being beaten, because the monster before her was far too big. He was too strong, his muscles solid as rock. Julius tells the child not to be afraid. They would create a world together, one where monsters didn't exist. And now we see in the fight that Miranda hesitated for a second, because on the wall he saw a child protecting her brother. That was the moment he stopped attacking Gunther, and Gunther managed to launch himself on top. When the monster turned to capture him, he slipped through its hands and managed to enter through its eye. Damn. And in just a second, the thing collapsed right in front of everyone. Unbelievable. The protagonist just needed to get inside. That was it. Problem solved. He's walking around now like a cripple, missing an arm and a leg. Yeah, but at least he killed it. The people in the city are all staring, unable to process what kind of body that was, what kind of monster he had just taken down. The child who had protected her brother asks if he's the one who killed the giant. He turns and says yes. What's the problem? Naturally, she thanks him, saying that thanks to him she survived, and her little brother also sends his gratitude. Gunther just ignores it and keeps walking. The scene shifts to Audrey praising him, asking how he managed to move so well with 4 arms. It was the first time he never fought like that. He really was a natural-born talented warrior. If he had a better-looking face, they could easily raise a statue of him in the city. Maybe even graft a little hair while they're at it. Arian, however, steps in from the side, puts her hand on his shoulder, and says it's a relief to see him safe again. He asks if she's sure, because her expression hadn't changed one bit. Damn, what kind of atmosphere is this? Gunther himself is left confused. But then, look who comes barging in, apologizing for interrupting the pleasant mood. The Queen. She says that in the end, she was the one who killed the Iron Giant, but the damage was massive. Still, thanks to her extremely precise evacuation order, almost no citizens died. Most of their weapons were destroyed, but at least the people survived. And now, she declares it's time to decide who should be held responsible for all this chaos. She asks Captain Raynor if he has any ideas. Word has reached her that in a crucial moment when he could have killed the vampire, he hesitated and everything ended up happening because of that. It seems like a critical mistake, one that guarantees a public execution. My God, no way. Audrey begs for mercy, saying that even if her father was a mercenary, he had a soft heart and never killed anyone. But the queen refuses, saying that unfortunately, someone must take the punishment for all that has happened. Gunther cuts in, saying the more he listens to this old hag, the crazier she sounds. Sure, the bald guy's a coward, but in his eyes, the bigger blame lies with the one who wasted troops preparing useless weapons and made it harder to find that damn box. But of course, in front of everyone, she won't admit that in the end, she's the one responsible for nearly getting everyone killed. The queen stares him down, demanding to know what he's talking about. And then, out of nowhere, a man appears at her side, saying the queen is still playing a role she's not suited for. Gunther realizes he hadn't even noticed the man approach, and before the queen can understand anything, the protagonist's head is rolling across the ground. The stranger declares that he is the king's brother, the last surviving true royal, the one who failed to become king, known as Velvet Hound. And as part of the promise he made to Julius, he came here to take away the immortal knight, a protagonist who's just a head against a 20-armed monster. No way. The next chapter opens with soldiers being utterly torn apart by this Velvet. He tells them not to throw their lives away so uselessly. He is the last surviving royal. According to Julius, he has to take the immortal knight, so they better not stand in his way. He's leaving without killing anyone. He shows them the head, saying they don't want to die over something like this. The knights reluctantly agree. They step aside because none of them could kill him anyway. That's when Olivia steps in front of him, saying she's heard the rumors that her uncle really had become a monster. He answers that she still seems to be suffering quite a lot, and what he wants to know is whether the queen or the princess is really going to stand in front of him over that head. She looks him in the eyes and of course just steps aside, as if she actually cared about that. Velvet walks past and then says their footsteps are noisy. True royalty makes no sound when it walks. And clearly, that struck a nerve with her, leaving her fuming with anger. Velvet keeps moving, carried along while everyone watches. The crowd doesn't react as Raynor says they have to stop this. If that man crosses the bridge and enters the forest, this place is finished. The forest is full of obstacles, hard to track through and harder to fight, and sunrise is coming soon. They had to buy time to get Gunther back. Raynor's daughter then yells out, asking why he isn't running but only walking. Velvet replies that true royalty never runs in front of others. Well then, they might as well keep following him and watching until the sun rises. He won't run. They follow him across the bridge until someone orders them to stop. It's Leonard standing face to face with nothing but his courage. Velvet asks if he really intends to block the path for the sake of a head, and Leonard, says yes. Velvet wants to know why. Leonard answers that it's because that man is humanity's last hope. Velvet laughs, saying it's funny. Every single human he's ever known has lived only for themselves. In the end, the ones who hurt humans the most are other humans. So why does Leonard think it's worth throwing away his life for such vile creatures? Leonard lowers his head, but suddenly lifts it and declares that even so, he still believes humanity is worth saving. No matter how dark the world is, he believed in the goodness of humans who never lost their light. And for those who only wanted to kill each other, he believed it was the light of the righteous that would heal them. And it wasn't just him. All of them felt the same. They wouldn't stand there and let this choice turn them into monsters. Brave, no doubt about it, and even Velvet admits it. Velvet answers that it's a touching speech. Too bad that out of the 1,000 people in the city, there are only 5 standing in front of him. Would that really be enough to stop him? Leonard ignores the threat and tells Gunther that since he had saved him once, now it was their turn to do the same, and they charge. I honestly thought they'd come up with some strategy, some insane move. But no, we see just before Leonard thanking them for standing with him. They reply that since he had saved their lives once, dying wasn't frightening. What they feared more was dying without meaning. Leonard assured them it would never be meaningless. Even if they weren't anyone important, never written in history, and never the main characters of the world, even if they weren't great generals or kings, maybe that tiny spark of courage could become strength for something greater. At least that's what he believed. The soldiers look at each other and smile, but then, they're ripped apart, lying on the ground with a leg gone and arm severed. Beside them, Leonard too, already missing an arm. Velvet walks past, saying they were arrogant, but he still finds their courage admirable, and that's why he'll spare their lives. Because mercy, too, is the duty of royalty. He continues toward the forest, saying that once inside, even royalty doesn't need to walk. It's the perfect place to hide from the eyes of prey. But then someone calls out to wait. It's Arian. The king asks if she intends to fight him. She answers yes. He warns her that one display of mercy is already more than enough. If they fight, he guarantees she'll die. Gunther's head is right there, clearly trying to say something. And Arian answers that either way, they have no future without that head. So if they're going to do anything, then it has to be trying to save it. Even though this was a man who had lived his whole life fighting alone, he looks at her and says it's just another touching confession. Strangely, she blushes a little, but then he draws his swords, saying that unfortunately, this is where she'll die without hesitation. He swings to cut her down, but she only manages to raise her blade to block, squinting one eye shut. Nothing happens. When she opens her eyes again, the sun had already risen and his arm was burning. Velvet realizes it. He had been caught in the shadow of one of the few trees near the forest. He mutters that if he'd taken just 50 more steps, he would have been safe. Just 50 steps, such a small distance, but such an important one. Now the queen is practically laughing at him, saying he truly is the face of real royalty, pathetic and pitiful. Hiding beneath a tiny tree, risking his life, terrified of death. He should have at least brought along a low-class vampire to shield him or something. But she's foolish to think that since he was cast out of royalty without a single follower, of course he has no vampire. Velvet admits it. When her father exiled him, he was sent to an island and had no one at his side. So, what will they do now? The queen says it's time to bring an end to a member of the royal family. Maybe she should chop down part of that tree or set the whole thing on fire. Velvet replies that destroying the tree to burn him in the sun isn't something honorable royalty would do. He never killed needlessly, and if he wanted to run, he could have easily escaped. But everything he does is to uphold the true honor of being royalty. That's why being trapped under this tree is part of the process, defending his honor. For her to take advantage of that weakness to kill him in such a cowardly way would be unthinkable for a descendant of the royal line. Arian calls it sophistry, an argument crafted to give the illusion of truth. I'm super intelligent, I definitely didn't just read that on Google. She says it because this man is trapped in the shadows only thanks to the sacrifice of the knights. They should cut that tree down now to finish him, not ignore the honor and sacrifice of everyone who gave their lives. Velvet then declares that, as royalty, he'll make an honorable suggestion. Arian keeps calling for Her Majesty while he wants to know if she'll listen. Strangely, the queen glances to the side, looks back at him, and her expression shifts. The next chapter opens with someone calling her pathetic. Maybe it's him. Mocking that holding her forth 3 times during a meal shows she understands nothing of etiquette. Now it's clear why her father didn't want her. She was never a vessel worthy of royalty, truly living up to the name Olivia the Fool. The scene shifts to her #1 fan asking if she really accepted the offer. She answers that refusing something fair would be dishonorable, and this time she'll prove she's worthy of royalty. She then demands to know where Patrick was during all this chaos. She barely even saw him. He hesitates a moment before saying he was looking for a way to escape with her if things got too dangerous. She snaps back that she knows he was really just securing an escape route for himself. Either way, he better disappear from her sight without a word, or she'll have his arms and legs cut off. And you shouldn't forget that his burial will always be next to hers. He just replies that he understands and walks away. On the bridge, someone asks if they're really going to let that vampire live and why. Arian explains it seems to be because they accepted the duel. Audrey finds it ridiculous, since that man was only trapped thanks to everyone's sacrifice. Arian answers they have no choice but to accept. The bald one then asks what duel they're even talking about. The scene shifts back to the tree, where a man raises his arms and declares that he is the true warrior among warriors. He's John Bayer from the Bayer family, and he was there as the great queen's representative, ready to finish Velvet with his fists. That's when Arian explains it's an honorable fist duel. Basically, the two of them will stand face to face, trading 1 punch at a time. Whoever takes a punch and then moves a single step afterward loses. Audrey gets it. The whole point is to keep beating each other until one of them collapses. What she thinks is ridiculous is that everyone's risking their lives fighting here, only for such a stupid contest to decide humanity's future. Raynor says it doesn't matter. The goal is to get Gunther's head back, and that's what's most important. Normally in this kind of duel, you send 4 representatives, but since Velvet's alone, obviously he's doing every fight himself. The bald one is optimistic, saying that since they can use 4 people, they still have a chance. All they need is to force him to take a step. Bayer is psyching himself up, telling himself it's possible he can win. Since they've accepted the duel, all he has to do is make this guy take 1 single step. No matter how strong a vampire is, the face has no defense. If he lands the first hit, this guy will collapse. Then he'll win the duel, earn an even better title, and maybe even aim for the position of emperor. Honor and money were right there within reach. The announcer declares that both have accepted the duel. You can avoid a punch out of fear, but if you lose your balance and take a step, you're instantly considered the loser. Then he announces that the one who accepted the duel's challenge, Baron, gets the first strike. Bayer shouts, saying this punch is for fame and honor, and slams it into the vampire's head. The crowd cheers, saying it was strong enough. And yeah, it really did shake Velvet's face, who admits the punch was strong. But the announcer clarifies Velvet didn't move, didn't retreat. So now it's his turn. Bayer tries to say something, but then, bang, he takes a cannonball punch to the head and is sent spinning away. Instantly, Velvet is declared the winner, while everyone wonders if Bayer just died. Patrick looks hesitant, while the queen says she wasn't expecting much anyway. He just has to win once. The next challengers are the ones who've already won duels like this, so she's eager to see what happens next. The second son of the Brune family, Nicolas Brune, steps forward, a massive guy. Where the hell was this legend when the monster invaded? Or when that vampire woman was slaughtering everyone? Even Velvet admits this one actually looks stronger, while Nicolas thinks this fight isn't about strength. He has to land a vital blow, create panic, and then it'll be easy to make Velvet move. and the best vital spot at the start of the fight is the temple. The vampire really reels when he gets hit, his head twisted sideways. Audrey looks excited, but the chapter cuts right there. Then the referee goes to call Nicolas the winner, until they see that even though Velvet's body contorted, he didn't move a single step. Nicolas insists it doesn't make sense. His whole back shifted, but the announcer says he didn't move a foot, so there's no issue. Nicolas starts to protest, and then, bam, he's sent flying too, smashed into the ground. Another one gone, and the crowd wonders if he's dead as well. Then the third representative steps up, Joseph Rambler, and suddenly it hits me. Could the last duel actually be Rainer's daughter? She's tall, jacked, built for it. Joseph says the most important thing in a duel like this is knowing your opponent. He studied the patterns, the habits, and now he's sure he knows how to win. A crucial weakness in Velvet's fighting style had been revealed. He grins, saying he'll show it. Except, yeah, he's already been blasted away too. We didn't even see the punch he threw. Audrey complains that it doesn't make any sense, that everyone's lives in the city are being gambled away like this. Arian quietly adds that now all they can do is pray the last representative makes the difference. She asks who it's going to be, and Velvet immediately questions why it would be Gunther. His head is his possession. He can't just hand that over. The queen replies that she never said she would use the head. She never once mentioned not using Gunther himself. And since all Velvet has is the head and not the body, clearly the body counts as a bigger piece of Gunther so it can be used. Besides, as she swore in the name of royalty, if he wins the duel, he keeps the head. Or is he scared of running away from this fight in a dishonorable way? Looks like Gunther's gotten his head back, wondering what the hell this so-called duel of honor is supposed to be, and he can't understand why that bastard even let him go. Oh right, probably the vampire had been covering his ears the whole time. From the background, the queen declares that this is a fight of honor, something someone like him, who lives such a meaningless life, could never understand. He just answers that he doesn't care to understand it anyway. The queen then says that if he wins this duel, she won't execute the bald one. Of course, he'd have to win it honorably. Audrey thanks her, and the queen simply orders them to prepare. The duel would take place the moment the sun began to set. Soon after, Gunther is testing out his new arm, asking what this strange sensation is. Arian explains that this arm is designed 100% for trunk rotation, transferring force into a punch, but you should be careful because it was built in a rush and can break easily. And the colors are a little off, because those are the arms of knights who were cut down when Velvet crossed the bridge. The protagonist feels uneasy, saying it's strange having pieces of each of him like that, but she tells him it's actually incredible after all. He himself said the most important thing was to keep living. He should be used to it by now. His body from the very beginning, all its parts, was built through the deaths and sacrifices of others. Hearing that, Gunther calms down and looks motivated again. And now they're standing face to face as the announcer declares the final duel of honor. Velvet, off to the side, is thinking hard. He hadn't expected to be in this situation, but he knew stupid Olivia would try something like this. Everything up until now had been within his expectations. On top of that, some of his many arms were gripping the bones of his lower leg, meaning that even if his whole body were thrown back, his leg would remain planted. Basically, it was impossible for him to lose. Some would call it cowardice, but all he had to do now was keep going and watch these fools fall. This was his revenge for what her father had done to him. His dark thoughts are cut short by Gunther's fist flying in his head at full speed. Velvet freezes, not even processing it. I think he forgot that if his head explodes, his body shuts down. And bang, a clean hit sends his skull flying. Gunther asks if that means he won. The guy's head literally flew off. But the referee announces that Velvet didn't move a single step, so the duel isn't over. Gunther flexes his arm, grinning that this duel is going to be a treat, while the vampire starts reconstituting himself, admitting that was dangerous but saying the game is over now. No matter how much that Adia Olivia tries, in the end she'll never beat him. But we cut back to earlier, where they were implanting steel rods inside Gunther's mouth. It was meant to help him withstand the blows. He said the taste was disgusting and weird, but Arian told him not to worry, the duel wouldn't last that long. In fact, it would end much sooner than he thought, so he better win. When Velvet's punch lands square, Gunther wonders why he hears a sharp metallic screech. The referee declares that Gunther didn't move a single step, so now it's his turn again. Gunther launches an uppercut, landing it flush on Velvet's jaw and blasting his head away once more. The vampire twitches slightly, but still doesn't move from his spot. Velvet reforms himself, snarling that Gunther is a bastard and smashes him with a punch. Patrick asks the queen if she truly believes Gunther can win, and she looks uncertain. Velvet's head goes flying again, and he almost takes a step back. He realizes this is getting dangerous. This weird knight was far stronger than he imagined, his whole body shoved back from just a punch to the head. Velvet tries to find the right angle to land his own hits, but strangely, feels like no real damage is being done. The word defeat drifts through his mind. As true royalty, he could not lose to this filthy woman, unworthy of any title. With a twisted expression, he shouts for everyone to stop laughing. He was the only vessel worthy of becoming king. Only him, the one truly worthy of that position. Gunther, meanwhile, is chewing on the steel rods in his mouth, muttering that he doesn't care. Velvet spirals deeper into madness, ranting that that woman's father stole everything from him. And as if that weren't enough, he even severed his arms, keeping him from ever trying again. Gunther just says the guy's family is completely insane. Velvet reconstructs another arm, declaring he'll prove that fakes never win, and goes for another punch. But this time, Gunther dodges. Velvet is left stunned, and Gunther counters with a strike straight to his chest. Everyone gasps. The queen is speechless as Velvet is hurled away. He scrambles up, screaming that the bastard dodged and threw away all his honor. Gunther shoots back that if Velvet is fighting the whole mess of limbs strapped to his back, what right does he have to talk about honor? Besides, he only went along with this because of the bald one, but now he's tired of it. Velvet tries to restore his arm, but realizes he can't. Just like Gunther had done with Evelyn in the circle, he had damaged Velvet's heart, making full regeneration impossible. In that moment, Gunther grabs him by the neck in memory and says the real fight is about to begin. But again, Velvet insists that in the name of his noble family, he has another proposal. Gunther's response is to tell him to go to hell and blast him in the head again. Probably the moment Gunther saw Velvet merging 15 arms into one, he gave up on playing fair. For him, survival comes first. The queen, though, obviously wants to know why he dodged. Even if he died, even if humanity perished, he couldn't act like that while representing the royal family. She screams desperately that he's a bastard, but Patrick steps in, telling her to calm down. Did she actually see Gunther dodge? He says what really happened was Gunther took the punch head-on, and with the fourth strike, he finished Velvet. Everyone else nods along. Yeah, that fourth punch was solid. He handled the third pretty well too. Patrick even rewrites the record, tearing out the old page and scribbling down. After Gunther received the third punch, he countered with the fourth and ended the vampire. Patrick says that's the perfect outcome, then turns and declares, yes, that's the truth now. The queen, still confused, mutters that apparently she's the one who won honorably, and he agrees, telling her she kept her honor intact. And there she is, smiling like a fool, celebrating, saying the victory is hers, everyone honoring the great queen. Meanwhile, Gunther is still pounding Velvet into the ground, the vampire begging him to stop, asking how long he's going to keep beating on someone with no arms. Doesn't he feel pity for a helpless enemy? Gunther calmly replies that he'll just keep hitting until sunrise. Nothing more, nothing less. Velvet, desperate, pleads for him to wait just a moment, says he has a proposal, only wants the boy to listen. But Gunther nearly caves his face in again, until Velvet suddenly blurts out the name Julius, the last pure-blooded vampire. He knows everyone must be searching for him. And Velvet claims he knows where Julius is hiding. If they spare him, he can lead them there, because once Julius is gone, they won't have to fight any more vampires. Humanity would be victorious. Gunther says he's not an idiot. If Julius dies, Velvet dies too, so there's no way he'd do that. But the vampire explains that Gunther doesn't understand how vampiric promises work. He swore to Julius that he would deliver the immortal night, meaning what happens between the two of them isn't his responsibility. He insists this is a great deal for Gunther. Gunther pauses, saying it's tempting. But how about he takes a few more punches before sunrise? Velvet screams, and with that, the sun is already up. Arian presses, wanting to know if he'll really guide them to Julius. Bound in chains, Velvet says yes, but in truth, his plan is to lead the immortal knight straight to Julius. The only thing he asks is to be treated as the last surviving royal. They should remove all the chains and shackles, because it's dishonorable. The protagonist scoffs, saying this bastard dares talk about honor after everything he's done. Sounds like he's begging for another beating. Velvet flinches when he sees the fist raised, then decides to shut his mouth. Arian says he can't be trusted. After all, if Julius dies, Velvet dies too, so that promise doesn't even make sense. What she really wants to know is, if Velvet didn't want to destroy humanity, why did he become a vampire? Twisting his face strangely, he calls her a very curious girl. But it's a shame the royals always kept so many secrets. Gunther just raises his arm, saying he's clearly playing word games and deserves another hit. Velvet tells him to stop with the threats, insisting all he wants is to be spared in exchange for taking them to Julius. That's the deal. Later, walking through the corridors, Arian says it would be a huge advantage to know where Julius is and take him down. The only problem is, before that, there's a lot to prepare. And just then, her nose starts bleeding. Not only bleeding, but a mix of purple and red, and she begins to collapse on the ground. We've forgotten what was said in the very first chapter. She's a life battery, which means her life force is being drained. The others rush to carry her, her whole body flushed red. She can barely breathe, her body heat is burning, and strange marks cover her skin. That's when Gunther notices she has a mass of implants along her back. He asks what that is, and the bald one explains it's the result of her becoming a human generator. A cocktail of drugs, potions, and all kinds of substances were pumped into her body. Those devices on her back work to detoxify the damage caused by those drugs, which is what lets the energy flow through the transmitter. On top of that, her intestines and organs are all compressed by the machinery. The only thing she can eat is certain types of soup. Gunther mutters that the fact she's still alive is already a miracle. Raider adds that this is why Arian is unique. No normal person could have survived all this, and yet she endured days and nights in that body. Still, Gunther wants to know, why did she collapse, and will she recover? The bald man says first they need to understand the source of the body's heat, what exactly is happening. Then he asks Gunther if he's worried about her. Gunther shouts, hell no, he's worried because if she dies, he dies too. The bald one realizes immediately he doesn't actually care about her. One of the plague doctors then reports her pulse has finally returned to normal, but they still don't know the cause of the collapse, and all they can do is wait and see. Meanwhile, Gunther is there, hooked up, saying there's a problem. He knows she's unconscious, but the bar on her arm isn't rising. The bald one tells him he should be ashamed of connecting to someone who's unconscious. Gunther snaps back that there's no way. What if she just dies out of nowhere? That's when the bald man explains that, just like him, she has to be running at high efficiency to make the transmission work. The worse her body gets, the weaker the output becomes until eventually it shuts down completely. The protagonist asks if there's no way for him to charge himself, and the bald man admits, yeah, for now there isn't. The only advantage is that the bar isn't dropping, which means Gunther will have to stay 100% connected to her just to stay alive. But the bald man warns he's not even sure if that's possible. If her condition worsens even a little and he keeps draining power, the battery might still fall to zero even while connected. Gunther mutters, this is a worse death than fighting vampires. The bald one agrees, saying since Gunther can't leave, he might as well stay and watch over her while everyone else mobilizes to find another solution. Gunther has no choice. He's stuck at her side, just watching. Every moment the counter on his arm showed less than an hour of life. He notices her groaning, drenched in sweat. Clearly, she's in unbearable pain. They tell him to use a cloth to wipe her sweat, but he complains it's a hassle. Still, he notices her face. So small. Her nose, her mouth, even her hands were tiny. And yet she endured the agony of having her organs twisted and her entire body modified. He just can't understand why she's going through all this. Just then, Audrey opens the door with more water and sees Gunther holding Arian's hand. She apologizes for interrupting a romantic moment. He shouts that he was only wiping sweat. Audrey tells him to enjoy his time and closes the door out of nowhere. Desperate, he yells for her to come back. But night falls and he's still there wiping away the sweat. He wonders aloud if she, who always acted so tough like nothing ever bothered her, is really just going to pass out beside him like this. He sits there, staring at her as the hours slip by. And then he remembers her words, that she'd hope to see him tomorrow. Gunther grows sentimental, clasps his hands together, stares at her, and admits that out of everyone, she's the only one he wanted to see tomorrow too. But then the sun rises and he panics. He's prayed, he's wiped her sweat all night, but she still hasn't woken up. Worse yet, even connected. The timer on his arm is dropping. Rainer steps in, saying they can't waste any more time. They'll have to go with the last option. Gunther demands an explanation, and Rainer tells him Arian's human generator can no longer function. Before it shuts down completely, they'll mobilize everyone to create a new one. She's carried off while people warn to handle her carefully. Gunther follows close behind until they stop at a gravestone covered in names. He asks what it is. Rainer explains it's the list of everyone who sacrificed themselves trying to become a generator and failed. Gunther curses, saying it's disgraceful that so many people died only to have their names carved in a forgotten place. The bald man explains that not everyone trusted the plan. At that moment, 2 plague doctors enter, announcing the test is ready and the candidate prepared. Gunther immediately protests, saying with just one, it's impossible. There's no way it'll work. But Rainer says they don't have enough materials, there's only enough to try with one person. Gunther frowns, saying it's suspicious that only one person volunteered. Who's the idiot this time? And sure enough, from the start of the speech, Gunther already knows. Rainer admits that all his life he's been indecisive, just like when he couldn't kill that vampire. Time and again, he made the wrong choices because he never had the resolve, and he's tired of running away like that. He wants to protect Audrey, so this time he'll do what has to be done. He's the one who'll become the human generator to save Gunther. And it looks like our boy only agreed because the bald one was already prepared, saying that creating a human generator doesn't take that long. Even if it doesn't work 100%, the moment everything is installed, he might still be able to draw out some energy. Gunther asks what happens if it doesn't work at all. Rainer just tells him not to worry, everything will turn out fine. The doctors take him away, saying the operation is about to restart. As he's let off, Rainer asks Gunther to please keep all this a secret from Audrey. Next scene, his veins and fingernails are turning blue and he's scratching at himself, writhing in agony on the table. Gunther demands to know what's happening and the others explain it's an absolute success. The first operation worked and now they'll move on to the second. Gunther mutters, well, good. It's not over yet. He asks the bald man how it feels to be a blue bald man. Rainer replies it's terrible. At least the first phase only had a 50% success rate, and since he's still alive, that counts as a good result. The protagonist praises him, telling him to keep that positive attitude. Rainer then wants to know how much energy he has. He looks down at his wrist and says not much, just a tiny flicker. He tries to sit up, saying he has something to confess while he's still conscious. Gunther groans that he doesn't want to hear any death secrets, but Rainer goes on anyway. Audrey isn't his biological daughter. Gunther's shocked, saying that explains why they seem so different. But if she isn't his, then where did she come from? Rainer explains he had been abandoned by the mercenaries he spent his whole life with. After losing everything, he lived on the streets. And what really broke him wasn't losing material things, but being betrayed by the people he had considered his family. Left to die on the streets until someone offered him a piece of bread. That someone was Audrey. He remembers her tiny dirty hand holding out half a loaf to him. She too had been abandoned by her parents, but he's grateful to them because it meant he could become her father. Just like he had been abandoned and was able to rebuild his life thanks to Audrey, he hopes that in this cruel and merciless world, he'll eventually meet someone who will heal his wounds. Gunther grows serious at that. The doctors enter and announce the second operation is about to begin. A stretcher is wheeled off into a room of strange tools and bubble in vats, while Rainer screams in agony. From a distance, Audrey stands by a window, as if she feels something. Gunther, still linked to Arian, says in this world nothing is more valuable than staying alive. His energy runs out and he powers down. And then, oh no, the scene shifts to the gravestone. Someone comes and carves in a new name, Rainer. Fall gaze, 5 hours and 4 minutes. That's how long he lasted as a human battery. Officially recorded as a failure, but he still managed to provide power for 12 days. Some called it a miracle. Others said it was sheer willpower. And on the 11th night, another miracle happened. Arian suddenly awoke from her deep coma. She was severely weakened, but by the next day she was able to function again as a generator. The moment Rainer saw her standing, his own health collapsed even faster. Maybe he was relieved then. Finally, lying in bed, he tells his daughter he never imagined living could be so painful. But even so, in this cruel and merciless world, she had come to him and become his light. He thanks his daughter, who is smiling at him, and memories flood his mind. The little campfire, her words, her wiping his bald head, and dancing. And at last, he tells her she was always far too beautiful. Then he dies. Here comes the worst part of all. Audrey didn't even cry when she saw him die. She said it had been his choice, and in the end, it was thanks to her father that Gunther had stayed alive until Arian woke up. She said she would have done the same. But of course, later that night in the house, they heard her crying. Next day, Gunther is beside Arian, asking if tomorrow they'll finally set out to kill Julius. A lot had been happening. She answers yes. They're out of time, and Velvet warned it would take several weeks to reach him. Gunther comments that finally, everything's about to end. But she seems strangely calm. Not only had she nearly died, but the bald one had died as well. She closes the book in her hand and says she would never have started any of this if she hadn't been prepared. Gunther nods, saying he understands. Still, it's good to see your face again. He just warns her not to go collapsing out of nowhere again. She laughs, and a little later he's lying in bed, while she sits quietly at his side, watching the door. Someone was about to enter, but suddenly Gunther already has his sword at their throat, demanding to know why the queen's lackey was here at this hour. The man chuckles that Gunther really is a tough one, but tells him not to worry. He isn't there on the queen's orders. He came to offer his condolences and to say he too owed much to Captain Rainer. Gunther glares, pointing out he acts very differently when he's near the queen. The man answers that people are defined by the positions they're put in, and he'll take that as a compliment. He heard they're leaving tomorrow, but before Gunther goes, there's someone who desperately wants to see him. Gunther says he'll wake Arian so they can go together, but the man says no one else can come. Gunther explains about the timer, that he needs to stay close to her so his battery doesn't drain. Was this meeting really more important than saving humanity? Patrick answers yes. The one who wants to see him is more important than humanity's future. He is humanity itself and history itself. He is the king of kings, the ancestor of mankind. Isn't Gunther curious about what really happened between humans and vampires? If he comes now, he'll learn everything. As they head down a flight of stairs, Gunther grumbles about this king of kings nonsense. How many kings did this nation have? Seems like he meets more people here calling themselves kings than actual normal people. Patrick tells him to calm down, saying this person is different. He really is the true king who once ruled humanity. He was the embodiment of truth itself. Gunther asks if Patrick doesn't worship the queen. Patrick laughs and asks if he really thinks she looks like someone capable of leading anyone. Gunther calls him a funny bastard, and Patrick thanks him. They arrive at a lavish but half-abandoned place, and Gunther remembers. It looks like the structure supported by those pillars he saw during the battle. He wants to know why they're here. Patrick explains that this place is deep beneath, a place that technically doesn't exist in history, built with expensive marble, onyx, and countless jewels. The air circulation was so perfect no one would notice it was underground. They even had fresh water. There were enough rooms for hundreds of servants to live. In truth, the entire city known as Bahal was built to serve this place. Gunther demands to know what exactly this place is. Patrick explains that it was where the kings of the past would go before death, a place where they could live eternal lives. It was called the Paradise of Kings. Gunther still doesn't get it, saying none of this makes sense, but Patrick just tells him to keep going. They move through more corridors, and Gunther sees strange paintings, scenes that look like vampire transformations, until finally, in one of the rooms, he comes face to face with a guillotine, a huge blade fixed in place, and Patrick says Julius belonged to this place. Gunther asks if that's the pure-blood vampire, and Patrick explains yes, a being that survives only on pure human blood, burned by sunlight and killed only if the heart is destroyed. For vampires, blood was the source of strength and power. But pure-blood vampires were creatures that had existed since the very beginning, and they didn't even need to drink blood. They could live eternally consuming anything. Noble, wondrous beings that until then existed only in mythology. But eventually, they discovered something incredible about those pure bloods. Just as human blood gave strength to vampires, the blood of a pure blood could give strength to a human. Gunther doesn't understand, and Patrick explains, yes, their pure blood could grant youth and extend human life. Basically, you could live forever if you kept drinking it. Gunther asks if everyone in that place survived from it. Patrick explains no, only a few selected ones, the king and a handful of servants, because pure blood was like a mirage. The moment it left the body, it disintegrated. That's why to have fresh blood available, they needed a way to obtain it at any time. Julius was imprisoned there and constantly decapitated so he wouldn't remain conscious. He supplied blood for humans for 950 years. Gunther mutters that now he doesn't even know who the real monster is. Patrick says it was all worth it. Thanks to Julius, humanity entered its greatest age of prosperity. The royal family gained influence over politics and administration, and any king of the earth when nearing death was sent to that place. He was judged by the kings below, who decided whether his life was valuable enough to be made eternal. Knowing of this judgment, every king pushed himself to create the best kingdom possible and achieve immortality. The one who created this process was Hound, the very first of all kings. Gunther scoffs, saying first of all that royal family lost their minds. Second, someone really screwed up since clearly their plan didn't last forever. He wants to know what happened. Patrick explains it was 41 years ago when a human granted Julius freedom and escaped with him. Gunther praises, finally a human with a conscience, but Patrick shakes his head, saying it doesn't make sense. Conscience? That's exactly what he didn't have. Just imagine the suffering unleashed because of the freedom he gave that vampire. Of course, the moment Julius was gone, that underground city began to collapse. The source of eternal life was cut off, and the people there aged decades all at once. They all died grotesque deaths, one after another. It started with the first king, and soon after the second, called Praus, also died. But the last hope of all, the one who had devoted thousands of years to humanity, the true king of kings, was still alive. And now it was time for Gunther to come face to face with the very history of humanity itself. Inside a room packed with books, someone says they've been watching him for a long time. Born from death, endlessly yearning for life. Alive but not completely. Dead but not entirely either. Existing right on the line between life and death, the so-called Death Knight, he welcomes him to his palace. The protagonist immediately blurts out that this weirdo is ugly as hell, to which the guy replies that he could say the same thing about him. Our boy's curious now though. What's this business about being watched for so long? For someone who's supposed to be a great king, he sure seems to live a pretty quiet life. The king explains that he doesn't just watch him, but that he keeps track of everyone's lives. When they were born, who raised them, what kind of lives they had, and how those lives ended. That's his power, to know and understand everything within this kingdom. Gunther tells him straight up that he's a creep and then presses him. If he already knows everything, why does he want to see him? With that weird expression on his face, a king reaches for a book and says, this is the story of Isabella Hound and her life. She was a woman who was about to become the great queen of this kingdom, but she gave up the throne and chose to run away with Julius. The book is still unfinished, and one of my greatest wishes is to complete it. That's why I want you to ask Julius about her. What did she promise him that made him want to destroy humanity? Gunther just shrugs it off, saying it's no mystery to him. The guy probably wants to wipe out humanity after having his head chopped off for 950 years. But the king explains that pure-blood vampires don't feel hatred. For someone like Julius, 950 years isn't even a long time. The real reason he wants to kill humanity is because of a promise he made to Isabella Hound. She gave up eternal life and the throne just to tell him something. What that was, the king still doesn't know. What he's interested in, though, is seeing what choice Gunther makes, whether he chooses to live or to die. After all, he can go on as a human or as a monster. He could even pursue eternal life, and since he loves surviving, that's something that piques the king's curiosity. Gunther doesn't answer. Truth is, up until now, he's been pretty questionable whenever survival was on the line. But here we are, golden weapon loaded, sword drawn. Arian says the time has come, and he only asks if she's been sleeping well. She says yes, thanks him, and just tells the damn girl to snore a little quieter. Blushing, she ignores the jab and mentions that Velvet is going with them, which means Julius will know their location at any moment. Gunther sees that as a double-edged sword. Arian also points out that the moment they leave this castle, every monster out there will start hunting them down. Risky, sure, but better than turning this whole place into a battlefield while they're still inside. And with that, they're already on the bridge when someone calls out to Gunther. It's Audrey, apparently enjoying them too. She's all cheerful, dead giveaway she's gonna die. He notes that she cut her hair and she says she just wanted a little change. To him, it looks exactly the same, but whatever. Funny enough for someone who usually doesn't care about others, our protagonist paying a lot of attention. He asks how Velvet is, and she explains that obviously he's been avoiding her at the manor. When he goes to check, the guy's shouting, claiming he's crazy for treating royalty like that. But Gunther just shows his fist, and the man immediately shuts up. The doctors then say it's time to leave. The carriage starts moving forward while Gunther remembers the king's words: live, die, stay a monster, or chase immortality. He was curious about all of it. With a small chuckle, he presses on, while from one of the faraway towers, the queen watches before turning away. At the same time, Julius is calmly waiting at his home, still as ever, for the two of them who are on their way. One step forward and we move on to the next chapter, where someone's already shouting, wanting to know what this 582 kilometers thing's about. Velvet says that's the distance they are from Julius. The protagonist snaps back, what kind of nonsense is that? These vampires don't know how to set up bases in accessible places, huh? Not to mention this carriage will travel, what, 50 kilometers total? At this pace, they'll get there in a month. Doesn't that bastard Julius know they're coming for him? Why doesn't he run in their direction too and give them a hand? Velvet answers that he said Julius should run, but in truth, he just doesn't understand the complexity of pure-blood vampire. He's always been in the exact same place, except for that one time he killed the king, and he'll stay there. The protagonist wants to know if there's some treasure there or something like that. Velvet tells him no, it's where Isabella Hound was buried. That instantly clicks with Gunther. That's the one the king talked about, the one who freed Julius from that place. At the same time, another girl's clinging to him, clearly exhausted. The journey's barely started and she's already asleep. Meanwhile, someone else is pointing at him, saying something beautiful's happening. He tells her to cut it out. The poor girl just fainted. He moves her head away from him. Suddenly, the horse jolts and Audrey slams her back against the wall, all twisted up. But once again, she sees Gunther shielding Arian. He mutters that he has to protect her. If she dies, he dies. Sometime later, the driver warns them to look ahead. The place is littered with countless corpses, a pile of dead bodies. He tells them to move away. As they approach, the smell of blood hangs heavy. It's fresh. The strangest thing is, the bodies have no bites or cuts. They look crushed. Gunther warns everyone to stay on alert, because there's a vampire nearby. He also says to collect the usable bodies. Maybe they can craft a weapon for him. That's when Audrey notices something odd. All the corpses are missing their hands. From inside the carriage, Velvet says this is going to be fun now that they've entered that person's domain. She asks who, and he explains that among the high-ranking vampires, there are two weird, crazy ones. One of them is Nesh No Hands, a filthy former slave that everyone hated dealing with. But one thing was undeniable: he had a real knack for killing. Velvet wants to see how many of them survive this fight. And they better not forget, they still have 582 kilometers to go. Moving on, Audrey is sure this road to Julius isn't going to be easy. They'll need to avoid fights as much as possible. And one of the most important things, as Arian says, is protecting the incredible black carriage. It's basically a simplified Bahal laboratory. Medicine, pieces of Gunther's weapons. They can make anything in there. Obviously, it needs to stay intact. Gunther, however, says the real priority is her, not the carriage. And as always, Audrey's there, watching all this romance play out. The protagonist thanks her, though it's easier to protect this small carriage than to hold off an entire army. At that moment, someone points out that the thing's designed to withstand shockwaves when suddenly someone yells, "Ambush!" Looking back, a plague doctor runs to warn them a vampire is coming. Gunther's already moving toward it, but they stop, telling the others to get ready. From afar, another carriage comes flying, smashing into them from behind, and right after, something else slams down and destroys everything. Seeing that, Gunther wonders what the hell kind of vampire this was. It looked like a giant hand. And there he was, standing on top of all the fingers, saying 30. That was today's target. He had to hit 30. Gunther can only think about how disgusting the creature is. Black hair at least means it's a low-class vampire. Right away he focuses, because the thing comes at him swinging 5-6 hands, and he mutters there are countless ways to kill something that weak. He slashes first toward the fingers while the guy remarks that his strength feels strange, like he's not human. But no one can hurt this body Nesh has given him, until the sword pierces through, slicing the hand, tearing both apart at once. But another fist comes from the side and hurls him away. The creature, strangely enough, starts celebrating, bragging that he already has 2 for today, but the celebration's cut short as Gunther closes in within a second. He realizes these bastards are unpredictable, just like a human hand. The problem is, they're massive. Then he sees 3 of them heading toward the damn carriage. The horses are running full speed, the driver yelling to go faster because more freaks are closing in. From behind, another swings down to crush him, but Gunther's there again, cutting through. He asks how many vampires there are, and someone answers around 30. Seeing the guy holding a crossbow, Gunther asks if the fool really thinks that thing's going to kill vampires. If he truly wants to live, he should drop that useless weapon and grab his steel chain instead. One of the plague doctors begs for mercy, but has his head smashed in by one of those giant hands. And the creepy vampire, using his massive thumb, grabs the man's tiny hand and announces that's the 12th of the day. Still far from his goal. He glances aside, sees the carriage rolling by, and orders everyone to follow. Fingers are running along the sides, others coming from different angles, while Gunther slashes in every direction, grabs some chains, and spins them around, tearing everything apart. At the same time, he keeps himself anchored to the carriage, pulls forward, dodges another strike. He snaps the chain around his arm, uses it to sling himself ahead, slicing through 3, maybe 4 more in a flash. The doctors inside are stunned that someone can cause this kind of destruction with just a chain. He really is a monster. They think this is going to be easy, and then he's suddenly ripped away. Arian's right there when apparently it's just a flicked stone shooting through the window. What the hell? The bastard declares the next one's coming. The shot fires, Gunther sees it heading straight for the carriage, tries to intercept, swings his sword at the stone, but blood bursts out. The next chapter opens with that very moment. His slash failed, and damn, the horses were shredded in half. As the first collapsed, the others tripped, forcing the carriage to a stop. He quickly asks if everyone inside is okay, and they say yes. Problem is, obviously, the horses are gone, so they're screwed. Another shot nearly hits Gunther as he dodges aside, spotting the bastards up in the mountains. The group's trying to raise the horses again, but he knows there's no time. The only option is to send the whole thing rolling down the slope. People inside are yelling, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing, asking if he's about to throw them all off the mountain. He just says yes and tells them to hold on. Then he himself shoves hard, jumps on top, and they go crashing down full speed. Poor Arian's drooling everywhere, while he mutters this ride is way faster than he expected. The real problem? A huge boulder lies ahead. One doctor shouts that they're all going to die. Gunther tells him to calm down, tilts to the side, slams his foot down to steer. They barely miss it, scraping the edge, but then the whole thing rides up the mountainside, and everyone screams in panic. That's when Audrey spots a bridge just off to the side. The idea is obvious. Cross that damn thing and cut off the vampire's path before they can catch up. The problem was, they were flying down toward the cliff at full speed, and nobody was going to survive that. Arian, of course, screams his name again, begging him to stop this, while our boy goes full Spider-Man, pulling on the chains trying to stop the runaway ride. Obviously, there's no way he's actually going to pull that off. Everyone was about to die, right? Although, knowing this story, it really does like killing people off. But somehow, they stop right at the very edge. Barely. So there he is hauling everyone back up with chains. I was about to say everybody inside was just being lazy, but no. They're all on the back helping out. That's when one of the doctors warns them that the damn little hands are rushing in, desperate, at least 2 fingers worth charging. At least they managed to cross before the fight kicks off, and now it's time to bring the bridge down. Gunther rushes forward, slams his blade into one pillar, then another, but somehow the bridge holds. The pillars must be anchored deep into the ground. Arian yells for him to smash the earth along with it. The problem is he's running out of energy, and this was going to have to be settled with one last punch. He stretches his arm, the creatures are charging across the bridge, and he slams down into the ground. The whole thing collapses, the cursed little hands tumble into the water, carried away by the current. Arian calls out to him immediately, but he insists there's no way in hell he's dying here, and then he passes out. Meanwhile, the remaining hands crawl out of the forest, and the ones made from that special blood are burned away, leaving only the one controlling them. They retreat to a cave, carrying a few severed fists, and report directly to Lord Nesh. He says it was decent work, but why does it look like nobody hit their quota today? And yeah, we can already tell what this is. He's a filthy ex-slave who had his hands cut off. There's no way it wasn't something unfair and cruel. Now he wants an army of hands to get his revenge. The underling apologizes, explaining that some half-monster knight got in the way, they lost plenty of comrades, and couldn't reach the target. Nesh demands to know what nonsense this is. How could they fail with the perfect bodies they've been given? For not reaching the goal, every one of them would pay with their lives. The vampire begs for forgiveness, while Nesh declares he'll take all their hearts. The poor fools in the back are sobbing, promising they'll double the quota next time. But suddenly, Nesh starts muttering, saying something about the fist. I have no idea what he means, but he asks if the guy is certain. The man swears he saw it. Nesh thanks him and says that this time they'll be spared. Everyone drops to their knees, overjoyed to live another day, drooling in their madness. Nesh asks what the mission will be next time. He stares at a single hand, and his expression changes. He declares, 10,000. Apparently the hand itself passes the mission. I don't really get it, but eventually this story ties everything together. At least it never leaves loose ends. Back with the carriages, the group is moving along the edge of the forest. The protagonist gives Velvet a smack, asking if he's okay. Velvet just answers that there are still 578 kilometers left. At this rate, unless they fall into some portal, it's never going to happen. After that whole mountain descent at breakneck speed, they'd only covered 4 kilometers. Arian is at least thankful they protected the carriage, but Velvet from inside says he doubts it. At this pace, they won't even make 100 kilometers. They have to push themselves far harder if the Death Knight's head is going to stay calm. He's laughing like some deranged psycho, while Gunther admits it's annoying, but the bastards tell him the truth. At this rate, there's no chance they'll survive 100 kilometers. The horses are the biggest problem. They're incredibly vulnerable and get killed too easily. And that's when Audrey offers the strangest thing. They've got plenty of corpses, so why the hell do they want to make a horse? Okay, not building one from scratch, right? Looks like they want to turn Gunther into a horse, and he's definitely not thrilled about it. Strangely enough, Arian admits it's true. Turning him into a big stallion would make things way easier. The problem, obviously, is how long it takes to pull that off. Audrey chimes in, telling him to relax, she'll handle it quick. Seriously though, nobody's gonna ask the poor guy if he even wants to become a horse. The poor bastard's about to be turned into some centaur-looking mess while they crawl along at 5 kilometers an hour. Meanwhile, the cursed little hands are charging in, desperate to find that guy and hit their quota. They're about to clash again, though technically from behind this time since the freaks are closing in from the rear. Gunther's half-modified now with weird stuff sticking into him, steel rods everywhere. He tells Audrey to hurry up, but she insists she's already doing her best, trying to finish as fast as she can. One of the hands suddenly leaps up, screaming for 10,000 fists aimed at Gunther. He glares back, and I don't even know what just happened. Did he block it? Although he lifted up a massive horse kick. Unidemon's shocked, asking what the hell that was. The thing gets crushed, stomped flat. Damn, those are some seriously muscular horse legs. The design is insane, and Gunther's actually liking it, saying that with this he feels like he can wipe everything out. Arian's about to tell him to stall for time, but instead she sees him running around like a madman, slashing through everything, demanding to know who's been talking about killing him. He stomps one of the creature's faces in with that giant horse hoof, spins around and almost kills Arian by accident. She yells at him to watch his side. The monsters are already scattering, fleeing in terror. They're screaming that there's a monster here begging for help. Gunther wonders aloud if he really looks that hideous. This whole cursed mess was way too tedious. Time to get back on track. But just as Arian's about to say maybe things will stay calm today, a strange roar echoes out. Nesh is nearby, muttering that 10,000 really is a lot, but they're just making it worse for themselves by trying to run. He turns to one of his followers, asks what the quota is, and then runs an arm straight through him, adding that he'll be taking his heart as a bonus. Gunther wastes no time, he's already on him in a second, sword strike nearly reaching the guy's eye. But before that, we saw him asking Velvet why this freak collects fists. Velvet explained it wasn't anything mystical. It came from a baron in some rural area who forced slaves to work on a peculiar plantation. If he couldn't hit the quota, he'd cut off their hands. Didn't matter if they were children, old, women, men, everyone died back then. Velvet swears that if he'd been king, something like that would have never happened. But Nesh is the kind of twisted person who whispers corruption into children's ears. He stares at that severed hand like he's hearing some eerie voice. Velvet always wondered who that strange hand originally belonged to. And then Gunther's strike, the one that nearly connected, gets stopped by a blade. Nesh sneers that it can't end like that. The slaves aren't here anymore. Then he drives a blow into Gunther's chest, declaring that now it's his turn to settle this. Weird vampire energy starts swirling around his body, transforming him into some grotesque Megazord covered in giant hands. He warns that today he's taking Gunther's hand and his fist. It's time to dance. Gunther fires back boldly that plenty of people have tried to kill him, but none have ever managed it. He's faced far stronger foes and lived through it. He charges forward, sword ready. Nesh simply declares that today will be the boy's first death, slamming a massive fist down toward him. But the next chapter opens with Arian saying that vampire blood almost has a will of its own. Gunther realizes they're like tools with consciousness, and she explains that's why they grow stronger when pain and willpower grow stronger too. Then she asks what kind of pain would cause the greatest suffering for a human. Audrey says probably being burned alive has to be one of the worst. Maybe also having absolutely no hope left in life would be unbearable. And apparently this is back when Rainer was alive, because he says once he heard a scream that didn't sound human at all. It wasn't coming from the throat, it was like it came from deep inside the heart, something animalistic. It came from a mother who had just lost her child in an accident. The three of them fall silent, and he says it made him think again, that maybe the most painful thing for a human is the heart of a parent, one who was forced to watch a child die. Yeah, and of course, Nesh the Handless saw his own child lose their hands and die right in front of him. That kind of thing could really turn anyone into a villain. And now here he is, using every ounce of strength he has to blow apart Gunther's arm. Gunther, of course, realizes it's not going to be that simple. Nesh seems almost disappointed at saying Gunther destroyed the fist, but he had to take it. How is he supposed to reach his quota now? He needs to control his legs better. But in the middle of his thought, Gunther interrupts him with a horse kick, slamming him, then unleashing another strike and another and another. The kid's pulling off a full Mortal Kombat combo, and yet the monster stands untouched, asking if that's really all the rage he has. The protagonist doesn't get it, how this creature hasn't even flinched, hasn't hesitated for a second. Strangely, as Nesh draws closer, Gunther feels something unsettling. He knows no enemy is without weakness, if for some reason he feels intimidated. Deep down, he knows he can't win against this guy right now. That's when Arian shouts from the back, telling him they've finished packing everything up. There's no reason for him to keep fighting. And he looks at her, remembering he's always been the one who chooses survival over anything else. With horse legs, he runs faster than anyone, sprinting at full speed. But of course, an attack teeters through his chest, blasting open a crater. From afar, Nesh calls out that he still has 10,000 fists to collect, so where does Gunther think he's going? Then, bam, it looks like it hit his head. Blood pours down, and he's wondering if it really struck his face how exactly he was hit. There's an eye on the ground. Only half his head was torn, but the brain's still intact. The problem is, his other eye is swollen shut, leaving him blind ahead. He can sense something charging toward him, but there's no way he's going to die like this. He leaps, shouting that no one is capable of killing him, and swings to punch back. But truthfully, he doesn't even know what he's aiming at. And just like that, the next chapter begins because every time something happens, it flips. Now we see Gunther in a pool of blood surrounded by corpses. A fallen man asks why the child is still fighting. Killing or dying changes nothing in his life, so why struggle so hard to run from death? Does he really believe he'll ever find a place he belongs? Or maybe he clings to the illusion that there's some way to take revenge on the parents who abandoned him in the trash. Gunther snaps at him to shut up, but the man only says he's a whiny child who's never felt love. There's no place for him in this world, no matter how hard he tries. No one has ever wanted him. With that, Gunther swings at him, and we're back in the moment of impact. His strike nearly hits Arian, who screams, grabs hold of him, and tells him he doesn't need to fight anymore. He's left confused, wondering how he can stay alive like this when he can't see. She tells him she'll be his eyes. She climbs onto his back, and together, they charge forward at full speed. The danger, though, is that the stones ahead could skewer him, and if that happens, she'd suffer too. But when the first one comes, she shouts for him to duck, and they dodge once more. But then Nesh leaps and nearly stomps right on top of them. They run in a panic. Gunther can't understand what the hell this fight even is. How is he supposed to predict anything when he can't see a thing? He wonders if maybe this is how he'll die and not understanding a single thing happening around him. Maybe this was the horrible death he'd always been waiting for. But Arian grabs him, telling him this time he's not alone and he doesn't need to worry. She calls for him to dodge left, and he just follows her words, moving blind. She warns that the carriage is 5 meters to the left. He just needs to go a little farther and plant his foot forward. He screams out desperately, and from Nesh's point of view, they're already way off in the distance, fleeing. Nesh mutters that the bastard really is slippery, and now it's complicated. He needs 10,000 fists to hit his quota. Still fine. He'll chase him every night until they're exhausted. In the end, he'll be the one to kill him. The scene shifts to the next day. They finally stop to rest a bit and check their supplies. Audrey asks what the next part of the plan is because unfortunately the boy's head is still open. Gunther, though, says to let Arian rest a little. She'd collapse. And then he asks the question, how do you even fix someone's head? He never thought about it before, but yeah, it's possible, right? Of course it is. The whole damn thing's stitched together already. That's what he's asking. Can you fix my eyes? I can't fight like this. She tells him something he needs to know. Luckily, his brain wasn't damaged at all, so they just need to put on a new cover. His face will be fine. The only real issue is the eye. And sure enough, when he looks around, everyone's distorted, their head's huge. He mutters something's off, everyone looks big-headed. Arian explains that the eye is the most complex part to rebuild for his body, and in a rush, this was the best they could do. He snaps at her and moves back, saying it looks like a balloon, and she explains that his right eye is closed and not functioning because it was so complex they had to give up. Specifically, the connections are almost impossible. Too many nerves, too tiny, and with the crude tools they've got, there's no way to do it properly. Gunther demands to know how he's supposed to fight like this. He even suggests taking someone else's eye and putting it in his face. Audrey says maybe they have a few spare eyes. They'll try their best. She asks if he can see with the one they put in, and he says no, not at all. Nothing. They try another one, looks like it's from a vampire, but the thing spins around wildly. They insert another. He says now he's seeing 8 of everything. Another one, nothing. Another, still nothing. She admits they tried all of them, and none worked. The real problem is, if they keep stalling here, Nesh will catch up. Better to keep moving and try to find a new eye along the way. So they carry on, but even a rabbit hopping across nearly makes him stumble. Stones tumble down beside them, and he panics. Arian explains it's just a small mountainside, rocks falling, nothing to fear. She promises she'll warn him. Still, she can't understand why he looks so shaken. He explains, from the moment he was born, he's been surrounded by people who wanted him dead. He could barely sleep, always afraid of a knife in the back. For someone who spent his whole life alert, watching every place, every moment, losing his vision feels like the entire world wants him dead. And he can still see clear as day the one person who wanted him dead more than anyone else. The one who brought him into this world and the first to wish for his death. He presses a hand to his face and Arian clasped it, telling him to stay calm. His vision will return soon, but until then, he can trust her. She won't let the darkness come near him. She says he can trust her. He answers he'll try. And just like that, look at this romance. I just don't know if I like the romance in this story because I'm sure everyone's going to die and get screwed over. In other words, it's going to be more tragedy than romance. Then Arian mentions there's a river up ahead, and when Gunther dips his hoof in, he pulls back immediately. A little later, they have to jump over some branches and both of them fall flat on their faces right into Manhwa. They keep going through deserts at night, forests by day, and snow, always side by side, hands clasped. Once again, he gets startled and she reassures him. It's just another rabbit. She glances up and says the night sky looks beautiful, like pearls scattered across the Black Sea. He answers that maybe it really is beautiful, while Audrey watches the two of them closely. That's when Audrey calls out to Gunther, saying she has to ask. She can't hold it in any longer. His attitude toward Arian seems to have changed, and sure enough, she goes straight for it. Do you like Arian? He stops to think and suddenly lets out a confused yell. Clearly, Gunther doesn't even know what liking someone means. All his life, he's only killed and been killed. He wonders about it while Arian cuts in, telling Audrey to shut up and asking what kind of weird question that is. Out of nowhere, Gunther turns all brooding, saying there's no way to know if he loves someone because he doesn't even understand what love is. Then he clarifies, slashing at the air as he insists they're getting it wrong. He's with Arian because if she dies, he dies. That's the only reason he has to protect her. But if he could keep living without her, he honestly wouldn't care. Audrey looks awkward, standing near one of the doctors, who wants to know why she even asked such a thing. The next scene shifts to Velvet being fed. He says the blood today was delicious, and he's already looking forward to the next meal. Audrey thinks to herself she never imagined this would be one of the problems they'd have to deal with, having to feed this spoiled brat every 2 days. The protagonist mutters it's strange. He thought high-ranking vampires didn't even need blood. And now they're basically dragging along a walking blood bag for this guy. Audrey explains that they need blood while fighting or to recover. Velvet adds that in war, the most important thing is supply. That's why vampires always carried blood packs with them. Audrey finds that odd, but Velvet explains that carrying around a live human was far too risky. You never know what they might do or when they might die. And even if you fed them, sometimes they just drop dead anyway. That's why they came up with a new method, creating a kind of human food box, a supply that could last for quite a while. Audrey demands he explain, but Velvet refuses, saying their relationship isn't close enough for him to share everything. Gunther stretches out his arm toward him, but this time Velvet says it's part of the royal family's pride. No matter how much they torture him, he won't say. Besides, he adds, they're nothing more than a death knight and a human battery. He's heard talk of things like that and wants to know how a death knight is actually created. He begins to ask if they use a certain method, but Arian shuts him down, reminding him that they have the right to keep their own secrets, and he better not forget the nature of their relationship. Velvet says fine, but it catches Gunther's attention. By now, they're on their 32nd eye transplant. This one, in theory, should be the best so far. It's the freshest and about the same size as his old one. He opens it and sees slightly blurry, but much clearer than before. Everyone celebrates, and one of the doctors explains that the donor's name was Doric, a 28-year-old who'd been Gunther's friend for 10 years. But he'd been severely injured in those battles and died that morning. His dream was to become a hero who could help save the world, and in a way, he could become part of it all. He asks Gunther if he'll remember his name. Gunther just replies that he'll try, maybe, sounding like he's trying to play the good guy even though he doesn't care about anything. With that, the carriage keeps moving. 414 kilometers left until they reach their destination. Slower than they wanted, but at that pace they'd eventually get there. The only problem is that Audrey is starving, bleeding from hunger. The only thing they've eaten these past days were 1 or 2 scraps of dried meat. She thinks it's ironic that Velvet, that brat, is eating better than they are. They've come too far without resting, and all she wants is to drink, eat a little, and take a warm bath. At that moment, one of the men in the group points out 2 people up ahead. They walk right into a noble-looking man and a peasant woman who say it's been a long time since they've seen other humans. They compliment them for surviving and ask if they'd like to spend some time in their village. Doesn't sound strange at all, right? Arian immediately questions why there's a village in the middle of a battlefield and why these two's clothes are so spotless. Who exactly are they? The odd pair glance at each other and start laughing. Clearly, something's off in their heads. They apologize for not introducing themselves sooner and explain that after countless sacrifices and experiments, they found a way to survive against the vampires. Now they want to spread their solution to everyone. Audrey wants to know how that works. The man tells her to come to the village and there he'll explain everything. They're lucky to have found them. But the camera keeps focusing on their creepy expressions. Thankfully, Gunther immediately says they're talking nonsense. Obviously, it's some trick, and why would they believe that just to invite more problems? Arian agrees and asks who wants to keep moving forward. Naturally, all the soldiers say it's better to keep going straight and not get involved with these strangers. Audrey, however, plays the fool and says they're running out of supplies and will starve before they make it. Yeah, that's a problem. But she's being naive, believing these people who claim they know how to survive against vampires. Now the hungrier members of the group start pointing out that the strangers have clean clothes, look well fed, and everyone's starving. Gunther tells them to just stick to catching rabbits along the way. But they argue, how are so many people supposed to survive on a few rabbits here and there? Then one of them suddenly shouts to get everyone's attention. About a kilometer away, someone was running toward them, dragging a horde of hands, screaming in desperation that it wasn't enough. Gunther instantly says they've wasted too much time already. It's time to run. But another man says Gunther might be able to escape, though not everyone will make it out alive. The suspicious, noble-looking guy chimes in, saying they can head to the village right nearby. There, no one worries about vampires, they just need to follow him. The people who were against it realize they don't have much choice, and so they end up going through a massive gate that closes behind them. Strangely, it almost looked alive somehow. Gunther asks Arian if she saw that. She says yes, that thing's anything but normal. At the entrance of a cave, the man assures them that vampires don't enter there, and even if they do, they don't have the courage to go deeper. They just need to follow this path to a perfect place full of food. Suspicious, but with no other option, they continue. Inside, villagers are standing around, clapping and shouting, "Good job, good job." Gunther finds it odd. On top of that, the place is full of tunnels and branching paths, making it hard to know exactly where they're heading. It feels almost like an ant colony. Sometime later, they arrive in an area filled with water. There are openings in the ceiling that look like they're meant to let in sunlight and some patches of crops too. The man then reveals a banquet they prepared. Arian immediately thinks it's suspicious and Gunther orders no one to eat, since they don't know what any of it's made from. But Audrey has already sat down and started eating. At least the man offering the food eats it as well, reassuring them that everything there is produced right in this place. As they can see, they've got sunlight coming in, water flowing through, they grow basic crops, and even manage to raise small animals. What they need most right now are more workers, so he's thrilled that so many people have arrived. Arian points out that while the place is big, it doesn't seem natural or man-made, and she sees nothing special that would keep vampires out. So why aren't they being invaded? The man closes his eyes and says he understands her reaction. It makes sense. They themselves don't really know why vampires never enter. They just flood here once and found a space they could survive in. It's cozy, almost as if Mother Nature herself is embracing them. Then he points at Gunther, saying he must be the death knight he's heard about in rumors. Surely they're on their way to kill a pure-blood vampire. But what are the odds of success? Why risk their lives for that? Why not just stay here and live peacefully? Arian refuses, but asks for supplies. One of the plague doctors at the front asks how the man can be so sure they can stay. Another doctor warns him not to say such things, but the man answers that the whole reason they're following the Death Knight is to kill that vampire so everyone else can live. And yet it's clearly a suicide mission. They're barely halfway there and more than 20 are already dead. One soldier agrees, saying this place seems perfect for living safely. Another speaks up from the back, saying he's not too eager to die and become just another piece of the Death Knight. This place really does look like a better option. Gunther immediately mutters that this is going to be tough to get out of, and asks Arian if she memorized the exit. She says she remembers, but unfortunately it won't be easy to bring the carriage out. He asks how that particular body is coming along, and she replies that some parts are ready. Just then, Audrey glances back and sees blocks falling into place, forming a wall that's like Dan Fortnite. Gunther instantly realizes the whole place is alive, like a real living colony. He orders the man leading them to explain what this place actually is, but the guy just keeps smiling with that same unsettling face, considering the amount of power at work here. Gunther's sure this place was built by vampires. Now the real question, is this a blood farm? Probably. What else would vampires want from humans? That would explain it. No other vampires invade because they know this is likely the territory of a stronger one. That's his bet. Make yours. The man says there's no need to fight vampires outside. They can live here, join the farm, and be at peace. All they have to do is one small thing for the community. When they ask what, he says it's nothing difficult. Just follow him and they'll learn the secret to staying in this place. Of course, the group is suspicious. Gunther pounds on the carriage, demanding that Bastard explain what this place really is. Velvet asks what he's talking about. He has no idea. They stumbled upon it by chance. Gunther warns him to stop playing dumb or he'll be killed. That's when Velvet says he's tired of hiding. Here it comes. He asks if Gunther remembers when he mentioned that vampires carry little lunchboxes into war. And this here was the place where they manufactured those blood boxes that kept vampires full for a while. Now everyone's staring at this giant spider that looks more like some twisted ant. They're all asking what the hell this is and why a vampire is here. The leader tells them not to be afraid. The vampire hidden there is named Linnell. This whole marvelous place was built out of parts of her body. They protect her and keep her warm with all the love they can give. All they need to do in return is show benevolent love to the queen. The soldiers immediately snap at him to stop joking. The goal of vampires is to wipe out humanity, so why would this one be looking after them? The man calmly says that makes sense, and that's why they chose to live in a symbiotic way. Velvet explains further. She needs the blood of 6 different people, and by draining them all at once and mixing it in her digestive system, she can produce what is essentially their little food boxes. The soldiers watch in disgust as the strange mass drops to the ground and demand to know what it is. The man explains it's a blood orb. That thing can be stored for over 2 months without rotting, and consuming just one means a vampire won't need blood for 3 months. In this place, everyone works hard so that the queen can produce more of these. The knights tremble, demanding to know why they're making food for vampires who will just use that energy to slaughter humans. Now it all makes sense. Why so many vampires outside the walls, even without humans to kill, still have power. The man laughs and asks, so what? He isn't killing anyone by doing this. And even if he were, the only thing that matters is that he himself survives. He doesn't care how many die outside, as long as he's safe. That's all that counts. The knights shout for him to wake up. This won't last forever. The vampire's end goal is to erase the community entirely, and once that happens, he'll be killed too. The leader admits that makes sense, but asks how long it will take for everyone outside to die anyway. 5 years, 10, maybe 100. In the end, he'll already be dead too, but at least he'll have lived a peaceful life. Better to choose now. Stay here with everyone or spend every day begging for life out there. Back at the carriage, the group is saying this place is far too dangerous. Better to be chased by Dinesh than trapped here. Right then, they hear screaming. Turning, they see men stumbling and covered in blood, saying it's a shame. They needed more workers, but now everyone is dead. And since the truth has been discovered, obviously no one can leave. What if they bring more people here? Too bad, this is the end for them, because as long as she's inside their queen's belly, they're invincible. Suddenly, the ceiling starts closing in. Audrey comments they're trying to shroud everything in darkness, and someone shouts to light a torch. The soldiers are trembling when the first flame sparks, and the man reassures them it's fine. But in that exact moment, another 5 or 6 come rushing from behind him. The old guy squeezes his eyes shut in terror, then turns to ask what that noise is, only to see Gunther tearing everyone apart. He's laughing, cutting 3, 4 of them down in a single sweep. One stomp crushes another, then he punches one so hard the body explodes against its allies. The enemies throw mashits, trying to blindside him, but Gunther steps forward, blocking everything, telling them he'll show how throwing is really done. He hurls one back, slicing 3, 4 in a single shot. He says it's laughable that they call themselves immortals when they die like idiots. At least now they won't need anyone else to work, since not a single one of them will be left standing. The tribe leader mutters that this is a problem. The Blood Knight is far stronger than they expected. But it wasn't a lie, they really were invincible. The problem was, he seemed to forget that they were inside the queen's body. At that moment, the entire ground began to shift. Audrey pointed out that from the very beginning it was obvious this whole place was alive. Gunther noticed everything around them closing in, constantly regenerating. It wasn't killing him, but it was limiting his movements, and it didn't look like there was any way to break through those walls. He could escape on his own shore, but he wouldn't be able to take anyone else with him. One of the soldiers shouted for everyone to look. The entrance they had come from was closing. Immediately, Gunther dashed forward, declaring that he was taking everyone with him, already dragging the carriages toward the exit. They tried to pick up speed, but the walls shifted, paths closed. Gunther, hauling the carriage at full force, managed to push through first, followed by one more, but the last was trapped behind, its passengers screaming. The others wondered what was happening, while Gunther just barked at Arian to show him the rest of the path. They pressed on as he shouted that he was going full speed. The place kept changing, walls rearranging, but the entrances seemed to remain the same. Then, out of nowhere, a mashite slammed into Gunther's leg. Figures appeared, sneering, asking if he really thought he could escape. They were all part of the queen's body. Dozens of them emerged around her, smiling, chanting that he wasn't leaving. The protagonist spat back that they were a bunch of disgusting freaks. Clearly, none of them were truly alive. The leader said if 2 or 3 blades weren't enough, then how about dozens at once? Steel rained down, stabbing deep into the iron carriage. Inside, the others cried out, desperate to know if Gunther was alive. He'd even caught one blade in his teeth to shield his face, though his body was pinned full of steel. The enemies couldn't believe he'd survived, but at that moment, one of his allies was torn apart. Gunther laughed, growling that they'd regret giving him so much ammunition, and pushed forward, taunting them. If they thought they could stop him, they could come and try. Arian warned they should have taken the left path, not the right. He only snapped back that it was too hard to change now. This was the route they'd take. Audrey demanded to know why he was provoking everyone, but Gunther was more focused on calculating how to shift his weight. His left side had taken the worst of it, worse than expected. His leg was shredded, barely able to move. But in times like these, you provoke your enemy even harder. It's the only way to distract them, keep them from focusing on your injuries, because a wounded beast is the easiest prey. The creatures kept attacking with wave after wave of cleavers, who knew from where, screaming that his death meant victory for the vampires. They'd already abandoned humanity, so now they would serve these monsters. But mid-speech, they were split in half, Gunther snarling for them to go to hell. The real problem was the path kept narrowing tighter and tighter, harder to squeeze the carriages through. One had to be abandoned, and the survivors pushed on foot. But then Gunther's wounded leg finally gave out, snapping beneath him, and the carriage almost tipped over. Arian cried out, asking if he was all right. He grit his teeth, saying if his movements weren't so restricted, he would have torn them all apart already. Worse still, they just passed what looked like an exit, only to slam into another wall. One of the soldiers warned they were trapped, nowhere left to go. Gunther asked if there was any way to destroy it, to open a path. But the man shook his head. It was impossible. The place regenerated far faster than he could ever carve through. And just as they were stuck in that chamber with only a small opening, outside the others were hesitating. In the end, they're human too, and they know the first ones to try and get through will be torn apart by Gunther. The girl hesitates, but the man tells her to relax. Everyone here risks their life for each other. The leader then speaks up, saying there's no reason to worry. That's an exit right there. They've got no food, no water. Time's on their side. He shouts to his people, telling them the offer still stands. Anyone who wants to live can come join them. Why throw your life away for others when you could save yourself? He's laughing like a madman, while everyone on the other side is left confused. Gunther says he needs a new weapon. What do they have that he can equip to get out of this place quickly? Arian explains they've got a torso, a pair of legs, another pair of legs, and finally yet another pair of legs. Gunther demands to know what the hell that's supposed to mean. Are they trying to turn him into a centipede? Audrey pauses, then admits maybe it's not such a bad idea. He's baffled, while the cave dwellers sit in silence, waiting for something to happen. The red-balled one mutters that they're holding out longer than expected. The leader just replies it doesn't matter. Time's on their side. That's when suddenly Gunther's voice is in his ear, telling him to repeat that. The man jolts, stumbling back, demanding to know where this freak came from. He shouldn't have been able to break through that wall. But there's Gunther, outfitted with 8 legs, saying it's incredible. Time to tear them all apart and make them regret it. The guy can't understand how he's moving so fast, but in the same instant Gunther slams a kick straight into his chin. He even says that the most important thing in this world is his own life. We then flash back a little to when they were training him to move with all those bizarre legs. Some even look like they came off a rhinoceros. He's stumbling awkwardly, and Audrey tells him to focus. He snaps back that she has no idea how weird this feels. Arian explains that this set of legs was designed after studying insect anatomy. In theory, he can climb any mountain, stick to any slippery surface. In just a second, he's scaling everything, boasting that with this speed and reach, no one can get near him. Not to mention, he can morph the legs into something like a scorpion's tail strike. He even swings an attack toward Arian, joking that she'd die right there, though it only brushes her lightly. She says at least this way he's got an advantage. The real problem, though, is how they'll escape this labyrinth. He shrugs it off. Why escape? All he has to do is kill the queen within 2 hours. Audrey admits that's an option, but reminds him the place is a maze. How will he even find her? Gunther just answers that he'll find himself a reliable guide to lead the way. And with that, he charges ahead at full speed, seizing the human leader by the throat, demanding to know where the queen is. The man refuses at first until Gunther starts crushing his skull. Then he blurts out that the queen is to the right. The other villagers shout at him not to say a word, warning that if he does, the queen will be killed. But obviously, the man's more concerned with staying alive. Meanwhile, I hadn't noticed they'd abandoned Velvet's carriage. Some people are trying to free him when suddenly something darts past at blinding speed. Velvet wonders what kind of strange creature that was. Gunther, still racing forward, snarls at his hostage to keep talking, point out the exit or his head will burst. The man quickly says to turn left. Survivors rush in with cleavers to attack from behind, but Gunther lashes them aside with his tail and bolts forward so fast they can't do a thing. Even as he's dragged along, the leader insists Gunther won't be able to break through the final defense. The queen's mouth was right ahead, but Gunther launched himself forward and, as her teeth snapped shut, he shot through like a bullet. He muttered that this was interesting, but now playtime was over. He was already inside the queen's chamber, while the others panicked, shouting that if she died, they'd lose the fortress. At that moment, the leader finally realized the truth. If this place fell, the vampires outside would slaughter everyone. The problem was, they didn't have the strength to stop this other monster, Gunther, who already knew all their secrets. It was all his fault for miscalculating, for bringing these people here. At this pace, they'd all end up dead no matter what. He looked at Gunther and broke down crying, begging for forgiveness, telling the knight he had risked his life so much just to bring him to this chamber. Gunther was left confused as the man sobbed like a child, begging for his life, promising he would serve humanity forever, swearing that all he wanted was to live. The others started dropping their cleavers, falling to their knees too, weeping, begging for mercy, admitting everyone makes bad choices, but all they ever wanted was to survive. Gunther laughed, saying they were adorable. He loved selfish people like them who acted purely on instinct. Because he was the same way, and fine, he'd show some mercy. He'd give them all a second chance. If they ran right now and stabbed the queen in the heart, the first 10 to do it would be spared. The rest would die. For a moment, they hesitated. The next, they were on their feet, shouting they were fighting for humanity. They all charged the queen, and then she began to peel back her mask, staring straight at them. Obviously, she wasn't going to just die easily, without resistance. And before anyone could pity her, we were shown what turned her into this monster. The woman recalled a family holding a baby, weeping. A hand landed on her shoulder, someone telling her it was a shame that the second wife had borne better children than hers. She looked aside and apologized deeply to her mother. The mother snapped back that she'd better not forget. Everything they own had been invested into this marriage with that duke. They sacrificed everything to grasp the royal bloodline and the power that came with it, even if it meant marrying the trash that was her father. All the hard work she'd done her entire life. She'd better not forget it. The daughter just stood there, replying that she understood. But the mother kept turning her face away, yelling that she didn't understand anything about the sacrifices that had been made. Why did she have to fail when they were so close to getting what they wanted? Why couldn't she just produce an heir? The girl, cross-eyed and broken, whispered that she didn't know either. She had married a man she didn't even like, just to please her mother. She was living in this foreign land, giving her all, surrounded by strangers she'd never met. All she asked was for her mother, the only person she knew, to treat her like a daughter. Instead, the mother slapped her, saying failures don't deserve affection. She was a useless girl. The mother turned to leave, and the daughter asked if she'd only been born to fulfill her mother's ambitions and greed. Was she nothing but a tool to birth children and secure ties to that noble house? The mother turned back and coldly confirmed, yes, she had finally understood. Now that she knew the truth, she'd better make herself useful for something. The daughter boiled with hatred inside but held her tongue. Then she told her mother that if her only purpose was to give birth to something, then so be it. She would create something, not the noble blood her mother craved, but something that would bring an end to humanity's suffering. And we snap back to the fight with Linnell declaring that she still cannot die. She still hadn't given birth to whatever was supposed to bring about the end of humanity once and for all. My theory? Maybe she's trying to create a new version of that woman buried with Julius. Honestly, that's one of the few things that would make sense. And then, out of nowhere, the entire forest erupts in an explosion, with her escaping, muttering that it's still too soon. The humans, meanwhile, are rushing after her, shouting that Gunther only promised to spare the first 10, so they'll be the first. They pile onto each other's backs trying to get ahead, when suddenly something slices through them all. It's Nesh, announcing he's found plenty of fists. Everyone turns to run while Gunther's soldiers remark that at least they managed to escape from that place. The protagonist then shows up carrying Velvet, saying he found what he was looking for and it's time to leave. The fool keeps demanding to be treated with respect, but Gunther just throws him to the ground and orders them to lock that trash up again. At the same time, the human leader is ordering one of his men not to block his path, only to get punched in the mouth and told to go to hell. He staggers up to curse back, but hears a sound behind him. It's Nesh, saying he still has a few fists left to collect. The leader stands, apparently recognizing him, and tries to bargain. He tells Nesh not to worry, that he'll help him meet his quota. Just tell him how many are needed, and this humble servant will gather them all. All he wants is for their lives to be spared. But Nesh keeps closing in. The leader asks what he's doing, only to be ripped apart, eaten alive, torn in half, until nothing remains but hands. Meanwhile, Gunther is sprinting at full speed, carrying the carriages on his 3 legs. Inside, they're whispering that he must have known all along what was happening in that production nest. Audrey, on the other hand, tells the fools that they deserve to die there, but at least now they've bought everyone more time. One of the men insists on going back to kill Linnell, but Gunther snaps that they don't have time. Facing 2 high-ranked demons at once would be impossible. He'd burn out completely. And besides, now that her nest is destroyed, a blood-spewing monster won't be able to do anything. Still, Linnell herself is staggering through the forest, muttering that it hasn't been born yet. She still hasn't given birth to what she needs. Sometime later, one of the soldiers riding on top of the carriage loses consciousness and falls to the ground. Immediately, others shout for Gunther to stop. They need to help him. Sir Eric says he hasn't slept in 3 days, it's far too much. On top of that, he's starving. Gunther sneers at the guy's a failure. But he starts to feel his own energy draining and decides to stop for an hour. Inside the carriage, Velvet mutters that humans are failures. Victory is so close, after all, they've destroyed the vampire's energy source. Yet here they are hesitating. Only 112 miles left, and all they need to do is keep moving. The others mostly ignore him. The focus shifts to Gunther feeding Arian, who clearly isn't in the mood. He orders her to eat, but she insists there are others who need it more. Gunther snaps, furious, demanding she eat more than just 5 spoonfuls. If she collapses, he collapses too. She tries to protest, but he shoves the spoon into her mouth, telling her to shut up and eat. If she doesn't, he'll kill her himself. Audrey remarks that they're such a romantic couple, but the man beside her shakes his head, saying he doesn't think that's the case. Gunther looks around and points out that only 10 remain. Compared to how many left the walls, it's a devastating decline. He asks Arian if she's sure this part of the plan will even work. Doubt spreads through the group. As much as he doesn't want to quit, he also doesn't want to throw his life away for nothing. Gunther hears this and says no one will die in vain because even if everyone else dies, their deaths will serve as fuel for him to stay alive. In other words, the plan will work as long as he's still standing. One of the men replies that if the plan relies on Gunther's sheer will to survive, somehow that actually makes him feel more relieved. The carriage is back on the road with the protagonist charging full speed, the group catching rabbits and eating whatever they can find. Another gate passes and Velvet announces there are only 61 miles left. It's an incredible feat for mortals. Their journey is nearly at its end. It's just a shame that, of course, he soon shows up. Suddenly, a figure in a hat sticks out in front of them, and it's Julius. He looks at Gunther and says he must be the Death Knight. Everyone immediately recognizes him, demanding to know what he's doing here. Julius tells them to calm down. There's no need to be afraid. He's come in peace. He admits he's failed to feel sympathy for their ambitions, but he's doing his best to show compassion. And through that, he's realized the Death Knight is making the wrong choice. Because the moment mortals win this war against humans that want to kill him, and the so-called Immortal Knight, Gunther demands to know what he's talking about, and Julius finally makes the offer everyone expected. It isn't mortals who will grant Gunther his true desire. It's Julius. That's why he asks if Gunther is willing to hear him out. Gunther frowns, not understanding, while Audrey yells that it's a trap, but he snaps at her to shut up. He'll be the one to judge if it's a trap or not. He orders Julius to spit it out. If it's a joke, he'll kill him right now. Julius answers with the obvious. Gunther is only being kept alive because they need him as a weapon. But once the war ends, a weapon is no longer necessary. Whether it's the survivor, the new king, or the true hound, someone will want him dead because he's a dangerous variable. Gunther pauses, deep in thought. Audrey keeps insisting he ignore it, that Julius is just spouting nonsense. But Gunther ignores her and asks, how would he survive? Julius says before that he needs to talk to the boy. First, it's uncertain whether the boy or Gunther himself will die in this fight. Vampires are the closest thing mortals have ever come to calling death. That's why he wants to understand the will of everyone here, just as he wants them to understand his will. Gunther's completely lost, demanding to know what this lunatic is going on about. Julius then explains the plans he has. He wants to be the first to do something no short-lived mortal has ever done: truly understand one another. The knights are all staring at each other, confused, but they know the man in front of them is Julius. Audrey, however, mutters that no matter how she looks at it, this is a trap. Arian warns they should strike first, when suddenly Julius brings up Gunther's parents. Just like any being in this world, he too had to be born of someone. But his father, staring at the sun, once said that life was boring. Then he walked outside and let himself burn alive. Those were his last words before stepping out and dying to the sunlight, just as his mother had done. Gunther watched his father crumble to ashes, yet he felt nothing. That was the sensation of immortality. Every day, hundreds of creatures are born and die before his eyes. Each one leaves traces that become part of the earth. But unlike humans, vampires leave nothing behind. They vanish completely. In the moment he realized there was nothing left the next day worth living for, he chose to sleep for eternity. Some humans walk through the catacombs carrying the king, who approaches a coffin and admits it's true. There really was a pure blood vampire sealed in this place. It was something he had searched for his entire life. And finally, God had given him the chance to reclaim his youth along with the world. But when the king opened his eyes again, his head had been severed. Blood spilled, yet in the very same moment, it vanished. The king screamed in desperation, demanding to know why it couldn't be preserved. He didn't want to live a life where he had to keep this creature imprisoned, living in fear. The man beside him explained that nothing of a pure-blood vampire remains once it leaves their body. The king said he already knew that, but he wanted them to find a solution, because his eternal youth would disappear the moment this vampire truly died. Without it, it would be the end of the nation. He was the one protecting all of humanity, the master of this world. One of his servants pulled back his hood and suggested the king try absorbing pure parts of the demon. Exactly what he was already considering, feeding on its fingers, its feet, and everything else. The king insisted he was doing it all for the sake of humanity. Did he bite into everything? Apparently so, that even after chewing up the vampire's flesh, nothing worked. No results. Standing before a mirror, he asked himself what more he had to do to become a perfect being of eternal life. The servant then told him there was only one part left, the riskiest but most effective, the pure-blood vampire's source of power, the heart. The king licked his lips, thinking of the eternal source of endless vitality. It was the only thing that, once destroyed completely, could kill one of these creatures. And if the heart wasn't whole, vampires lost control of their blood. But what no one knew for sure was just how much a heart could be damaged and still function. Maybe even cut in half. Maybe into thirds or even quarters. No one dared take that risk, though, since they all wanted Julius to stay alive. So the king carved out a tiny piece to devour. He lifted the plate, ate it, and declared it was the taste of perfect vitality. It was delicious. But that small piece of heart didn't grant him eternal life. Instead, it only fueled his hunger further. He began to consume more and more larger pieces every time, until at last he had eaten half of Julius's heart. The king screamed, demanding more and more, while the strange servant who had suggested it all stood silently watching. The scene then shifted to Julius opening his eyes. Someone whispered that he had finally awakened. The girl before him said that having his head cut off for 900 years must have left his memory fractured. But throughout all that time, he had been used as nothing more than a tool by humanity. Countless humans had fed on his blood, and all she wanted was to beg forgiveness on behalf of every single one of them. She said she was willing to die by his hands if it would ease his pain. All she asked was that he forgive humanity. Julius, however, only asked who she was. The soldier beside him declared that he was in the presence of the most benevolent and noble princess to ever exist, the true Queen Isabella. But she cut him off, saying he was wrong. She was nothing more than another sinful human. Julius replied that he had already known. He knew humans had been drinking his blood and chewing his heart piece by piece. Yet he bore no resentment or hatred for what they had done to him, because long ago life had already lost its meaning. Outside the cabin, Isabella explained they had built this place far away from anyone. As long as she lived, she would stay by his side, protecting him so he would never again fall into human hands. Julius, still confused, asked why she was going so far for him. She only answers that she's certain if she hadn't done it, eventually someone else would have. Time passes and she tells him she's brought another book. It seems to be one of the most beloved among humans, and she asks if he wants her to read it. He tells her to do as she pleases. More time passes, books pile up, and she begins to grow old. Then one night she cries out in panic, saying this place has been discovered and they'll need to move somewhere safer. He says it's fine, that if it's her wish, he'll follow. In the carriage, Julius only watches her face etched with fear. They travel for days and nights. At one point, the mustached knight tells the queen that unfortunately they have no money and no allies left. If she allows it, he'd like to spend the last days of his life with his family. She thanks him for everything he's done until now. Later, Isabella tells Julius that spending her life serving someone as extraordinary as him has been wonderful, but sadly, her time is ending and he'll be left alone when she dies. Julius replies that for the first time in 100 years he had a dream. In that dream, they grew old together while their children grew into adults. In the end, they were buried side by side while their children surrounded their grave. Isabella answers that maybe dreams are impossible by nature. It was then that Julius found his purpose in life. He wished that the day Isabella drew her final breath would be the day he ended his own immortality. But that dream never came true. They were still in the cabin when Julius told her she had 1 year. That was the limit before her death. Isabella only asked if he would stay by her side when she was gone. He told her yes, he would remain with her in the coffin where she would be buried. Isabella then asked that if that was his wish, they should be buried somewhere no one could ever find them. He agreed since it was her desire. That night, Julius' dream began. In his dream, he was buried deep in the cold earth, unable to breathe. Yet he didn't feel suffocated or uncomfortable because Isabella was beside him. He could feel her flesh decomposing, insects feeding on her body. Even so, for the first time, he felt at peace, and as his own body fell apart, it was slowly absorbed into the soil. He began to wake from the dream, but as he turned to the side, someone spoke, carrying words from the King of Kings. Humans are idiots because they believe the ridiculous sense of justice they cling to will never betray them. The man had driven a sword into Isabella. Immediately, he pulled it free and tossed her into the snow, saying the former princess was worthless. Their task was to hunt the pure-blood vampire. They advanced toward Julius, who simply glared back and ripped them all apart in a single strike. He walked to Isabella, telling her that her fermenting spirit was too dangerous. He knew this wasn't how she wished to die. He could spare her from death by turning her into a high-ranking vampire, if that was her desire. He leaned in to bite, promising she would gain eternal life by drinking mortal blood, but she asked him to stop. Over time, she had learned that humans didn't grow wiser with age, only more greedy. She begged his forgiveness, but said that, unfortunately, she wanted to leave everything behind and let destiny take its course. Looking at her hand, she confessed her only regret was not accomplishing one thing before death, something she had never been able to see. Julius told her to just ask. If she wanted everyone who had done this to her dead, or the entire royal family destroyed, he would make it happen. But Isabella said that what she wished to see one day was a world where no human suffered because of another's greed. Julius then gave her his word. One day, the world she wished for would be created. She then placed her hand on his face and told him that he was still her beloved, melancholic god. And with that, Isabella died. We return to the present, with Julius saying that after her death, he spent years and years researching ways to create a world without greed. That's when he discovered that mortals had a unique trait. They were quartered creatures, ones who naturally worked together to survive. The problem was that selfishness and greed always tangled with those intentions. If there was any species on this planet born to torture one another in the name of survival, it was mortals. That's when he came to the conclusion that for a world without suffering to exist, humanity itself could no longer exist, because they were the very cause of greed. And of the like on this video that helps Mamoru make more juicy content for his viewers, activate the cheeky little bell, and I'm out.